Good evening. The regular meeting of the Bellflower City Council is called to order on Monday, July 8, 2019 at 7:03 p.m. Back to open session. We are reconvening from the closed session, and there are no reportable action taken at the closed session. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dutton,
Here.
Councilmember Hamada,
Here.
Councilmember Coops.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza,
Here.
Mayor Santinez.
Here. Tonight's invocation will be led by Councilmember Raymond Hamada, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Director of Planning and Building Services, Elizabeth Corpus. Please rise.
Thank you, everyone. Let's pray. Let's see, dear Heavenly Father, again, we thank you for the gift of community and this evening given to us to conduct the business of our hometown. We thank you for the many blessings brought to this place we live, work, and play. Father, we pray for our public safety and our armed forces personnel so that a 243-year-old country and a 61-year-old community can remain full of life, liberty, and happiness. Father, we pray for the next steps for solutions, recovery, revitalization, repair. Father, again, you give us an abundance of opportunities. Father, we ask you for your wisdom and guidance as we consider the items on tonight's agenda. Father, you give us our strength and boldness to persevere. We ask this all in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamada and Ms. Corpus. Let me start with City Council announcement. Save the date for 2019 Bellflower Theater Talent Show. This year's talent show performance will be hosted on Saturday, September 28 at Bristol Auditorium here at City Hall. Auditions will be taking place on Monday, August 19 at 6 p.m. Kids and teens from ages 6 to 18 are welcome. For more information, please call 562-867-3524 or visit their website at www.bellflowertheater.org. Mayor Pro Tem Garza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Housing and Grant Division of the City of Bellflower is offering 2 housing programs to assist first-time homebuyers and homeowners. The first program, the Home Buyers Assistant Program, helps qualified households with 80% of the lender required down payment and also 100% of the customary non-recurring closing costs of a home, up to $50,000. The second program is available to aid homeowner occupants for the purpose of completing home repairs and improvements. Both programs are available citywide. If you have any questions or would like to know more information, please call Travis Sayas at area code 562-804-1424 extension 2286. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Garza. Councilmember Dan Coops.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Bellflower Chamber of Commerce office will be hosting their Morning Mingle networking event on Tuesday, July 30 from 9 to 10. This networking event serves as a great place to learn about small businesses and community projects. The Chamber office is located at 16730 Bellflower Boulevard, Suite A. That's right on the corner of Flower and Bellflower Boulevard. For questions about the event or to join the Chamber of Commerce, please call 562-AREA 867-1744. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Coops. Councilmember Raymond Hamada.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see, please join us for the City of Bellflower's Blood Drive. This event will be taking place on Thursday, July 25th from 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on the second floor of City Hall in the Green Room, which is just above us here. To schedule an appointment, please visit www.redcrossblood.org and then use the sponsor code. Let's see, all in caps, capital C, capital O, capital B. You can also call Wendy Thomas at 562-804-1424 and that'd be extension 2266. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamada. Councilmember Ray Dunn.
Thank you, Mayor. The Parks and Recreation Department invites you to their community outreach meeting taking place on Thursday, July 11th at 6:30 p.m. at the city booth located on Bellflower Boulevard during the Summer Street Fest event. Come out and learn more about the athletic fields and community center renovations and participate in the discussion regarding selection of design of the elements. And for more information, please contact Kristen Smith at 562-804-1424, extension 2267. Or you can also email Ms. Smith at ksmith@bellflower.org. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by CityNet on the homeless survey results. By way of background, when we did a survey of our citizens in terms of how they perceive the service of the city, one of the items that our citizens are very concerned about is homelessness. And so we are addressing that issue. About beginning of this year, we engaged the services of CityNet, and we contracted them out in terms of doing a survey and providing us with solutions to address the issue of homelessness. The contract with CityNet is for 15 months, started on April 1st, and if I recall correctly, their first 3 months of the contract is for them to do a survey to find out exactly what we are up against. So tonight, after completing their survey for the first 3 months of this contract year, they're here to report on the results of their survey. So with that, I'll turn it over to representatives from CityNet. We have Brad Fieldhouse and Matt Bates.
Good evening, Mayor. Pleasure to be here, council members. Myself, Brad Fieldhouse, this is my colleague Matt Bates. We're here to sort of kind of address and kind of bring we've completed the first 3 months of our project. So in addition to sort of hitting the ground running and working with lots of folks, we sort of did sort of a kind of an assessment on scale and scope of the challenges that you guys are facing as a community. And so we've sort of dug our teeth into that a little bit, and we want to sort of report out and kind of walk through some slides of what we've learned, and then maybe entertain some questions from you all as we go through this. So the contract that we have signed with you guys is a 15-month contract. First 3 months were the discovery phase. These are the goals that are related to the scope of our work as it relates to homeless services here in the city, in partnership with others, community members, faith-based groups, other agencies, Kingdom Cause of Bellflower, and others that are working to address this issue as well. You can see these are the goals. I'm going to cover sort of what we've begun to do, a little bit on sort of the first and second one. I'll give you an example of some of the report outs so that as we move forward and continue our work, you'll sort of know what we're reporting, so that we're measuring what, and when you see the reports in the future, as we move forward in sort of now, not just a discovery phase, but a case management phase, you'll know what you're looking at in terms of what we report out. And then I'm going to turn over to Matt, and we will talk about our homeless census that we completed and sort of get into the weeds of sort of what we found, and Matt will cover all that data. And then we can be available for Q&A. So the first couple issues here is obviously the goal is that we want to see homeless individuals exited from the streets and into the system of care that does exist. While it is limited, the goal is to help those individuals that here are living on the streets navigate what tends to be a complex and or frustrating system, not just for them, but for even people trying to utilize the services that exist out there. And obviously connect them to and through various agencies in the region. This is real-time data. This is sort of how we measure our work. So I'll walk you through this. This will sort of help you understand. And when you see this graph in our monthly reports that we will be submitting, you'll sort of know what these numbers mean as we move forward. So outreach context is just the generic term. These are potentially duplicated interactions that we have with individuals living on the streets here in Bellflower. And these are the beginning of a process of establishing trust, whether or not we're working with your public safety officers and we sort of come out of a vehicle and start to engage, or we're in our van that we drive around in here in the city. These are individual conversations that we begin to provide services. Statistics would say, if you looked at the National Mental Health Association, it takes anywhere from the first time, if you just happen to be there and there's some receptivity and an opportunity, all the way up to 6 to 7 times building that rapport with individuals So you can see on a monthly basis, we're engaging with some significant time potentially invested in these engaging individuals with the goal of enrolling them in our services. So building that trust where they actually then become client engaged with us, where they actually sign a release form and they provide us information that's actionable for us. Outreach lines, we do track people who contact us directly as we go out and make these interactions. We do give them a direct number for them to contact us. And that's, you can see we're beginning to sort of see that number tick up of people that are reaching out to us. Referrals to services are sort of those initial things where we are actually sort of just helping to connect them and help them navigate the existing system that exists, and helping them, so that could be anywhere from referral to a different agency or potentially whatever they're facing. If they need some help assisting them, we can give them that sort of referral. Client engagement for us is really when they begin to sort of, it's the culmination of that process where they sort of essentially agree to sign a release form with CityNet that gives us permission to, as we say, fight on their behalf, to work through the system and sort of with their permission share data that's frankly none of our business. It's very private information many times, and we sort of get that data, and then we can, depending on how they answer these questions, makes a difference on what kind of services are available. Some things that, as simple as a veteran having an honorable discharge or a dishonorable discharge makes a world of difference in terms of how you begin to access resources. So things like that, as well as health conditions, personal information, family connections, those kinds of things. So currently we have 14 individuals that are under case management with us that have agreed to do that. One of the things we've been doing as we've been going out with your public safety officers is we worked with them to identify the individuals who are sort of the high frequency utilizers of emergency services. So there's a prioritization oftentimes based on vulnerability, which is really important, that we want to make sure that the resources that do exist get focused and prioritized on those that frankly are on the streets and the most vulnerable. But in addition, we've also done some assessments around who are the folks that are sort of using the emergency services, whether that be hospitals, law enforcement, those things that are sort of generating resource depletion, and those tend to be prioritized. We have been working with those cases since the day we started. We currently have about 9 of those individuals that have been identified meeting that criteria that we are working with on a regular basis. Some were at the early stages, and others we've actually been doing quite a bit of work with them, really to sort of help them navigate through the system. So those tend to be a little bit more complex in many cases in terms of some of the challenges that they're facing, and so it may take us a while to navigate those, but we're working with public safety to make sure that those folks are prioritized as well. And then street exits is a HUD term. That's not a CityNet term. That's a category. There's over 30 categories of what HUD considers either a permanent or a temporary solution to get somebody currently living on the streets, off the streets, into something that has a little bit of, and we don't count these. This is why we sort of quarterly, we assess these monthly, but sometimes if people we're working with, for example, are in some sort of bridge situation that we've helped them get into, we sort of work with them to make sure they stay there. Sometimes that doesn't stick, just like my diet plans don't always stick. Sometimes, it takes me a few times to kind of, or maybe I still don't get it actually, but sort of after a while, the goal would be is that they would stick. And if that's a next best step for that individual, then we would count them here as a street exit. And we classify those internally. There's a whole bunch of criteria, both permanent and temporary, answers for what those would be. But that's sort of how we measure our work. We would expect moving forward that, as you see in our contract, that typically the level of work that we're doing in partnership with the region and the agencies in the city, we would expect to see 5 to 6 street exits on a monthly basis is what we put in the contract as well. So that's kind of how we speak about our data, and you'll see sort of the nuances of how that moves along. Second component really is sort of supporting the coordination efforts in Bellflower and in the region. The reality is there's lots of great people working on this cause, and we're privileged to be joining that team, and we've sort of almost completed sort of our complete understanding. We've attended lots of meetings to sort of make sure that we aren't contributing to, or maybe where we can help bring some efficiency to duplication of efforts potentially, and we definitely don't want to contribute to that, obviously. So we've been working from a case management standpoint as well as coordination of resources. We've been attending those meetings as you see in the report, and we sort of log those, and we kind of give you the highlights of the high point ones of sort of all the different meetings that we've been going to that sort of speak to collaborative case management, working to make sure that who's working with what individual on the streets, and you can sort of see that this kind of continues. So there's lots of those meetings. It's important that on your behalf, we make sure that we're represented well in those meetings, and we're bringing the cases that we're coming into, particularly some of those high utilizers of emergency services, and make sure that they are not lost in that system. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he's going to sort of walk you through some of the slides, and then I'll come back, and if you have any questions on any of this data, you can ask that in a little bit. Matt.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about from the start is a census or survey-based count. So the idea here is that we would, over the course of several days, that we would go to any place and every place in the city. If you were to go back, and some of the meetings we engaged in from a community engagement standpoint were to map the city. I mean, obviously you have a map of the city, but to create like the maps where we were going to where we wanted to cover. So we worked with your law enforcement and community partners to identify places that we should spend additional time, and also places that we needed security. So there were a number of locations throughout the city that that we went with law enforcement so that they could offer access and security, because there were some places like under freeway overpasses, for example, that legally that we can't go there, nor would it be safe for us to send a team without access and security. So on two different occasions, one early morning, one late night, we covered the entire scope of the city twice, at least twice. Some of the maps more frequently than that. Because this was a census, a survey-based count, that meant we were asking people's names and date of birth. And so if we engaged them more than once, we could deduplicate that list. So the headline is kind of at the bottom. There are 172 individuals is what we counted. We use GIS technology, so that map is an actual map of where all of those surveys took place. If you're interested in particular clusters, you can see that there's particular clusters that might represent more than one homeless neighbor in that location. But the technology is pretty slick. You can zoom in or zoom out as close as you want and get a really accurate picture, at least in that point in time, of where your homeless neighbors were located. So some of the key findings.
Matt,
Yes.
just for the benefit of the audience here, just the main thoroughfare here. So this is Alondra, right? Alondra?
Correct.
And this is the freeway.
The 91, yes.
Okay, and this is Bellflower Boulevard.
That's right.
Okay, all right.
That's right. So we put some of the key findings, and there's the 172 unsheltered. If you, there was no such thing as a composite homeless neighbor, but if there was a composite in terms of most frequent responses, you're looking at a male in his 50s who identifies ethnically as white, has been homeless for 1 or 2 years, and has a disability. So if there's a typical homeless neighbor in Bellflower, that's the most common. Significant rates of disabilities. So those are, we asked that in 3 different ways. Physical disabilities that would prevent someone from working, mental health issues, and substance abuse. All those were self-reported. Chronic homeless is a HUD term, which means, and it's listed there, been homeless for a year or more and have a permanent disability. So 73% of your homeless met that criteria. And then in terms of resources, we looked at income, health insurance, and CalFresh, which is also food stamps, what it used to be called food stamps, just to see who is accessing common public benefits to which homeless neighbors are typically entitled.
Before you go, can I ask a question?
Sure, yeah, you can ask.
Slide. Okay. Let's start first with the population of 172. So that's how many you encountered, and then taking out the duplicate contacts between one morning and the other evening.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm kind of trying to understand this. Let's say if you go to chronic homeless, 68 individuals, that's 73% of the respondents. So how do you compare the number of respondents for that item against the total population of 172? Because if I did a quick back of the envelope math, 68 at 73%, that's about 93.
Correct. So
So can you explain to us, in terms of the different questions, how many are actually asked? And the corollary question is, why were the 172 not asked of the same question?
So they were all,
Okay.
all 172 were asked, and so in the full report, we identify for each of the questions the universe that answered that question, so the N. So on each graph, you'll see an N number, which is the number of respondents for that particular question. So not everybody, obviously, it was optional to answer any of the questions, so this was an optional survey. So not everybody answered every question, and even those that agreed to answer questions didn't answer every single question. So they may have declined for whatever reason to answer one of the questions. So for each question, there's a particular universe or an N of those that answered that question. Now, chronic homelessness combines a couple of different characteristics: length of homelessness and disability. And so there we're looking at two different categories, and we're looking at all the individuals in the universe who answered both of those questions sufficiently to allow us to determine how many met the chronic homeless criteria.
Okay. So basically, just to clarify, for the sake of our audience here, the total population is 172. So in each question, some did not respond to a specific question. That's why the population kind of keeps changing. Okay. All right.
That's right.
The other on the disabilities, you said 55% of surveyed reported having disability, and then 40% having struggled with mental health concerns, 31 with substance abuse. So I'm assuming, and I want to confirm this, that it seems like if you add the percentages, there are some members of the population that have more than one issue in that category. Maybe a combination of disability and mental illness, or disability and substance abuse, and any combination thereof. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And so those were separate questions, and so an individual could answer yes or no to each question. So they could, in theory, answer no to all three, yes to all three, or yes or no to any one of the three. So therefore, the same person could appear in multiple categories.
Okay, all right, good, that's clear. In terms of the resources, 47% of individuals have no income, 60% are not receiving. When I was reading this, it seems like the first line is, I was excited, because when you say 47% have no income, that means that the opposite, the complement, 53% have income.
Correct.
So to me, that's a good sign, that more than half of who you surveyed, at least they have some kind of income. No matter how meager it is, they have some kind of income. Okay.
It also speaks to so what we have this data, right? Not only do we have sort of the registry where we can begin to kind of measure against that in terms of sort of how do we measure and sort of serve the population, but some of these things become sort of actionable in the sense that these are sort of, nothing's a quick fix, particularly for people in a traumatized population living on the streets, but these becomes things that, through some quick assessment and some quick work, resources that are readily available to folks can be brought to bear, like CalFresh, for example, or health insurance. There shouldn't be anybody in our context that doesn't have health insurance, for example.
Yeah, but for me though, one of the good things that came out of this is the 53% having some kind of income, and I will go to that later on, because to me it's a silver lining. It's really it's good news, actually.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
All right, keep going.
Ties to Bellflower. So community ties is a category of questions that we asked because we're trying to, and we're trying to determine to what degrees because homeless neighbors lack a fixed permanent address by definition, to what degree are they linked to Bellflower? So we asked in a couple of different ways. We asked last permanent residence, the city. What city do you usually sleep in? And then also, where was the location of your high school? To try and get at in a couple of different ways, and to just illuminate the question of ties to Bellflower. So 86% reported they primarily sleep in the city. 36% reported that their last permanent address was here in Bellflower. We'll show the complete pie chart here in a minute to see some of the other respondents. That 36%, you might say, well, 64% are from outside of Bellflower, which is true in the sense that that's where their last permanent address is. But if you look at the cities, for the most part, they're the surrounding cities to Bellflower. So from our perspective, the conclusion that we would draw is, for the most part, this is a homegrown issue where you've got neighbors that have become homeless in and around Bellflower, and they're here because this is what they consider to be their home.
Now, Matt, on the 14% who don't sleep in Bellflower, do you know why they come to Bellflower?
So they were here, those would be people that, we interviewed during the day. And we didn't ask that question specifically, so the data doesn't speak to that question, but anecdotally and from experience, there's a certain percentage that move around. It's not uncommon for people to get on a bus in the morning, move from the place that they've slept. And that could be for work. It could be for linkages to community resources.
When you say work, so they work in Bellflower,
It's possible, yes.
but they're homeless.
Right, but as the previous slide mentioned, there's 53% of the people have some income, and some of that income is earned income. So in our experience working with homeless neighbors, about 25% of your homeless population has some earned income. And so that means that they're working, and that could be seasonal, usually that's seasonal work and part-time work, or part-time work. But it is earned income, and they're living in a condition of homelessness because they can't afford the rent. Probably the ones that would most commonly come to mind would be people living from their cars or their vehicles. So a number of people that we engaged here in Bellflower, we engaged in the evening in their vehicles. They were going to sleep in those vehicles that night, but they came from work. They had driven to work that day, and they drove back in order to sleep in their vehicle in a parking lot here in Bellflower.
And you contacted them on those 2 days. I was kind of wondering, what are the chances of someone working in Bellflower being homeless, don't sleep in Bellflower, and you were able to contact them on those 2 days? I mean, the chances are very slim, but
Yeah.
you were, I
Well,
guess.
and this is where, with the nature of these kind of surveys is that it's, as thorough as we try to be, we recognize that it's a point in time. It's
Yeah,
a
right,
particular
right, yeah.
sort of snapshot. And so there are some that we're catching, and there are many that we're not catching. In particular, one of our conclusions with this data is that, our suspicion is that there's a significant percentage of the population, locally that is housed. They were housed the night of the count, but they're marginal. They're insecure in their housing. They're the one paycheck away. So if something goes wrong, and they miss a paycheck, they're vulnerable to living in their car or out on the streets. And that's very common for us, that we come across people that, for the most part are housed. Most, maybe they have one episode of homelessness every 18, 24 months. And so it's a matter of, did we catch them on the night of the survey or not? We will catch them, on outreach, and as we engage with homeless neighbors, and ask their stories, they'll tell us, I've lived, in a house condition for a significant period of time and just recently became homeless. Again, an anecdote, but when I was on the outreach, there was a gentleman. He was living from his car, and he was living at his mother's house in the driveway, living in the car, because the mother didn't want him in the house. And this was in a neighboring city until his mother died, and his sister sold the house. And then he could no longer park in the driveway. And so he was then he had 2 cars, and he was trying to keep them both, and to keep them free of parking tickets, and keep them from being impounded, and keep them, registered, and tires, and all of those things, and sort of juggling a number of things. But he was here in Bellflower with both vehicles the night that we did the survey, and that was his story. Yeah. The other thing, okay, so homeless 1 year or more, so 80% have been homeless for 1 year or more. We'll show the pie chart for that as well. The other side of that story, so that means that 20% were homeless within the most recent year, an additional 32% in year 2. So 24 months or less, 52% of homeless neighbors became homeless within the last 24 months. Very few children, only 2 that we found, and that's pretty common. And that's actually another good sign, which is that for the most part, it's very rare to find minors, even accompanied minors, living homeless. The main event, we asked kind of an open-ended question about what was the main event that led to homelessness, and most of the responses were clustered around housing loss due to rent, foreclosures, landlord disputes, those kinds of things. And then the other thing that again, we think is a really positive sign, we asked just simple, would you be interested in case management? and 78% expressed interest in that, which is a high number in and of itself. But I think it's even, it's very encouraging to our team because very often this was in the first interaction. So they don't know our team, they don't know us, they don't know who we are. Our hope would be that over time, as they get to know us and they get to become accustomed to us, that even a higher percentage of respondents would be interested in working with us on a case management plan to end their episode of homelessness. So again, taking a look at some of the behind-the-scenes data, and we have a full report that we've submitted to the city, so including answers to all the questions. And so if you want to look at the data in any number of different ways, you can of course ask us or look at the data and analyze it yourself. Length of homelessness, so there's that 2 years or less is 52%. We also have to say, having done a number of these censuses in cities across Southern California, that's very common, is to have about half your population be homeless within the past 24 months. And I think that speaks to this kind of churn of people that are on the margins of homelessness and that are at risk of becoming homeless. It also speaks to sort of long-term solutions, which is that, we've got a number of 172, and if we worked, from today to a year from now and got all 172 of those housed, what this would suggest is that there would be, half of that number would still be homeless on the streets of Bellflower, just because, or some within 2 years, half that number would repopulate itself. So you've got two different issues going on. You've got this tells me on one end at the top where you've got 11 years or more, you've got 16%. That's a significant number of people that have been homeless for a very long time. They're likely facing significant barriers towards being housed. And so that's one challenge on that end. And then on the very other end of the spectrum, you've got people that are falling into homelessness. And so any efforts in terms of prevention and diversion are going to be essential long-term to solve homelessness in the city. Here's the community ties kind of graphs. The city that they usually sleep in is on the left. The last permanent residence is on the right. And so we grouped all the cities that had the 2 or 3% or more, and then the balance we put into LA County for other cities. But the majority, of course, are here in LA County and local to Bellflower. Here's the disabilities, and so again, I guess point out this at the end. You see the N118. That's the number of people that responded to that question about whether or not they had a disability. For all of these disabilities, mental health and substance abuse, the responses were self-reported. We list as an attachment in an appendix in the report the actual question that was asked, written the way that it was asked. But we didn't seek independent verification, and so the question was just asked in a way, like mental health said, do you have any mental health concerns, including, for example, anxiety or depression that lasts longer than a few days? And then they could say yes, no, don't know, or refuse. So it's our experience with these is that these tend to be underreported in a survey like this, just because that's a very personal question being asked by somebody that they don't know. For a reason that they're not entirely sure of. I mean, we explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, but there tends to be a certain level of mistrust in these kinds of things. And then particularly when you get into very, personal questions. The reason that we do ask these questions is it's really important to understand the degree to which people have disabilities, because that connects them, that qualifies them for certain resources. And so we want to know it that way. It's also one of the questions that HUD mandates when HUD does a point-in-time count. And so just this past January, homeless neighbors in the city would have been asked those same questions, and so we feel like it's a good data point to collect that would align with what HUD is asking.
For the purpose of this question, Matt, does substance abuse include alcohol?
Substance abuse would include alcohol.
Okay.
I think the particular question, do you struggle with alcohol or drug addiction?
Okay.
And they were able to select just alcohol, just drugs, or drugs and alcohol as a yes, so that we can differentiate between those substances. And then there's the case management question. So 119 of the 172 answered that question, and of that group, 78% answered in the affirmative. So with that, we wanted to end on what we consider to be a happy note. But we would be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, any question of Brad or Matt? Go ahead.
I have some, but.
Why don't you start,
All right,
Councilmember Hamada?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of waiting for my colleagues.
Seems like you're kind
Out of
of-
respect.
You're very anxious to start. Okay.
Well, no, again, first off, thank you, Brad and Matt, for joining us tonight to give us this much awaited summary and so on. So, just a couple quick questions. What time of the evening did you do the census on the 23rd? I'm just kind of curious. If you felt that was the best time, where you're going to find the most numbers, or are they already sleeping somewhere, or those kind of.
Yeah, I mean, historically, I don't think the report says it specifically. You were
Yeah,
out
what
there.
didn't it
He was,
didn't-
he was on the night outreach. I was on
Oh,
the
okay.
morning, so.
So we went from, it was 6 to 10, but the team was out till 11 that night
All right.
because
so-
they kept finding additional people. So it was scheduled for 6 to 10, and the team stayed out till 11 on the night of the 23rd, and then they were out in the morning of the 21st. I think it was similar hours, like 6 to 10.
What was the breakdown between the 2 days? Is it pretty much the same number, or roughly close?
No, I could get that to you.
Extreme, like.
Yeah, I could find that for you.
Oh, okay, that'll be later. When you got the responses, and just one in particular, I noticed was the gender question, and 122 of, say, the 172 responded.
Mhm.
So why not make a decision to say it's male or female, or if it's, I mean, there was a third category, transgender.
Mhm.
But I know that, if you didn't want to decide, that just out of respect. But again, we're trying to figure out, to mobilize resources, and
Right.
and what if the ones that didn't respond were all female, and then that would, change the numbers around. And
Yeah, I mean, true to the integrity of the process, it's a self-reported survey,
Right,
even though
yeah.
in many cases we were working with public safety and riding in police vehicles, it still is optional for the integrity of the
Yeah,
process.
sure.
Over time, as we sort of continue to develop a case log, and so some of these individuals that we may have bumped into, it might have been the only day they've ever been here. They just happened to be the day we bumped into them. There may be people who are just passing through town. That happens regularly. We may never see that individual again, and we will have them on our archive list, but not on an active list. If you take that data set over time, which will probably be much higher than that, just because we'll bump into other folks, so call it 200 and some, over time, we could probably continue to monitor that and maybe continue to give you those sort of numbers, but to the process, we let them answer the question, no matter what the question was.
during the first 3 months of your studies and field work, have you been able to contact again all the main stakeholders in towns, like again, i.e. the largest churches that
Yeah.
provide some sort of homeless service?
We've no is the
No,
simple
you haven't
answer.
yet.
I mean, so we tried to kind of stay a little bit under the radar,
Alright.
just to sort of kind of do our due diligence to find out. Our team was out there doing case management. Some of the cases we've actually invested quite a bit of time and resource trying to kind of work with certain individuals, but that sort of is the end of that discovery phase. So for the next 12 months, we will strategically begin to go to different groups. We've actually asked city staff.
Yes, you've started contacting some of the churches. I think I saw it during some of the
Yeah,
monthly-
for
the
sure. I
monthly
mean,
report.
we sort of, but that's kind of been maybe a little bit more directed by
Oh,
other
right.
partners are saying you should go take a look over here. Similarly with a map, if there's something going on in a particular intersection, we want to go investigate that and maybe sort of kind of learn, why is this a particular hotspot? Are there certain reasons why this is a particular place where there seems to be a number of folks? And it may be a community resource of some sort. Salvation Army, churches
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
providing different resources. And so we will do that, and as well as get a little bit more public now to sort of continue to start going to meetings upon your direction. If there's places you think we should go and talk about and or entertain questions, we do that all the time. Community meetings, those sorts of things. We'd love to sort of begin to be part of those meetings moving forward. But we haven't sort of focused it. We haven't done like a faith community asset map exercise. We've just gone where we've been directed and
Oh,
or
all right.
we've bumped into individuals who've invited us to come join them there thus far.
And just my last question, Brad, on your chart showing the monthlies, 96 during the first month, I think, contacts, the outreach contacts, and then it dropped down to 50 contacts. So during the first 3 months, are you expending the same amount of time on that task of outreach? Are you
Yeah.
trying to, break up your month with a good share of outreach and contacts? And
We will always be working throughout the entire process. We will always work with your public safety officers, and that involves going out with them, doing sort of outreach and engagement with them. That will always be the case. We will continue to do that. On any given week, there may be how we spend our time might be different in terms of the number of individuals we work with, depending on what we're doing with
Alright.
some
yeah,
of those individuals.
again, from the first month to the second month, there's a drop
Yeah.
of almost 50%, and it'd be nice to see, again, homelessness drop by 50%, and so on and so on,
Yeah.
keep dropping. But all right, I was just kind of curious.
And they could be duplicated numbers.
Yeah,
There could
of
be a
course,
number,
yeah,
but
yeah.
our goal is we will always be on the streets. I mean,
Alright.
particularly as we sort of fine tune our role here in the city and kind of look at the other resources that are being deployed. That is an area where we think we can continue to create value, is by being out on the streets. And
Yes.
we'll continue to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Mayor Pro Tem Garza?
I do. I just
good.
didn't know if my colleagues.
No, go ahead, go ahead. Your
Already.
turn.
Great. So, I just want to start off by kind of echoing what my colleague said. Thank you for doing this. I think for us as a council to really get a better grasp as to what we're encountering and what we have to kind of set the direction for next steps, we needed this. And we know it takes time to conduct this, especially for an organization like yours that's new to our city and, to your point, doesn't have that established line of communication with these people. I know that if a stranger comes to my house and it's asking me these lines of questions, I'm going to be more inclined to close the door, right, or shoo them away. So it's an art. And I know it takes time. And so I appreciate your effort with this. So my questions are going to be really, a lot of my questions were answered by my questions from my colleagues. So, but I do still have some. So let's go to the next slide after this, if you don't mind. Or the first one for the executive summary. Okay, right there. So of the 172, correct, can you remind us what the number was for the point in time for Bellflower in January? I think it was 141, 148, I believe.
I think it's
148.
140.
148?
Seeing some.
Okay, so 148, right? Okay.
Head nods, yes,
So obviously those two don't match, so,
correct.
which is good. I'm happy because I expected, I think most cities that do a more in-depth census find that there's a higher count than
Correct.
at that point in time. So
Particularly
I'm
when
really,
you do it in the evening as well. That also invites a different population that you don't typically see in the morning.
so I'm really happy to see, I'm not happy to see more people suffering from this,
Right.
but I'm happy to see that we're in line with the general, a trend that there's more people out there that are not being accounted for during that point in time in January. And just to, if you don't mind, just can you define again what you mean by disabilities?
So, yeah, so disabilities, we're trying to get at questions that would qualify people for particular forms of housing. In particular, there are forms of housing that are available for those that are suffering from disabilities. So, the categories for disabilities are some physical condition that would prevent you from working, a mental health condition that's persistent and severe, and again, I think there's a work component there, and then an active substance abuse condition. So those are the three categories that are, from HUD's perspective, are aligned with disabilities that then qualify an individual for permanent supportive housing.
And I understand, I know that this is a voluntary survey, right? So
Correct.
some of these people may actually have some sort of disability, but they didn't wish to share that with your.
That's correct. Or they didn't know. So sometimes, I read the question about mental health, which we have added that line about anxiety or depression that lasts more than a few days. because that is a definition of a disabling condition, and most people who are homeless in our experience they just consider anxiety and depression sort of par for the course. Well, everybody suffers from that, and they're thinking mental health as schizophrenia or bipolar or some more something more severe and persistent and more kind of visibly evident for someone that's suffering from that mental health. So if you ask that question, very often people, it's not reported because they're not recognizing that what they're dealing with is actually a mental health condition.
It makes sense. Okay, so 55% reported some sort of disability, or it could be a mix of, right? But
Correct.
So 45% did not. So
Correct.
which honestly was educational for me. Like, I did not expect that. I thought the number was going to be higher, frankly.
Right.
Um,
And my suspicion is that it is higher.
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's underreported. But I think that's this. But this number, I would also say, this number is in line with other censuses that we've done.
okay.
So it's not low in the sense of what what we found in other communities. But it's low when we actually sort of get in there and start working with people. We find the prevalence of these disabling conditions higher than what is reported on the censuses.
Do you find that when we conduct a second census and there's still some of these groups out there, these actual persons still in the street, that you'll find that your results change, like the responses change from what they provided for you the first time versus the second time? Or are they pretty consistent?
Well, it's consistent and for the most part, we have a relatively low duplication rate, in part because we use the same teams for the most part. So it's the same teams go out and cover the same maps in both the morning and the evening, and so they kind of remember. The teams can kind of remember. We also give as an incentive, we give out. I think we gave out like a McDonald's or a fast food card, with that could be used at a fast food as an incentive. And so sometimes people remember. Our team remembers giving those out as well. So it's a relatively low percentage. When we do have those, the data does change from time to time. But we've never looked at patterns or trends in terms of like what particular questions change.
On the resources, again, I was surprised with how many actually do have, to the mayor's point, have some level of income. I did not expect that. So is it that if they had more income, they wouldn't be homeless? Like, the reason I'm asking that is because we're going down this path. Like, I'm not sure if like red some cities or maybe increase affordable housing rather than a temporary shelter would be a solution. So.
Well, you've hit on the kind of the key question that the whole state of California is wrestling with, actually.
Yeah.
And again, pointing to the data, like Santa Clara County did an important study, LA County did an important study. Most recently, Orange County, United Way, and UC Irvine did a study on homelessness and sort of cost of homelessness to communities. And the United Way study, which was 2017, again in partnership with UC Irvine, they concluded that the best way to think about homelessness was as an economic condition. It's the delta between what housing costs and what people can afford to pay for housing. And so there's it's no secret that housing in Southern California is expensive. And so there is a large group of people that have income, they have funding, and they can't afford housing. One of the areas that wouldn't appear on this census, but which does exist, is families and individuals using the motels as de facto low-income housing. So there's a significant percentage of this population in Southern California that are considered sheltered, housed from a HUD standpoint, but they're paying week to week or month to month on a motel. And actually, that's more expensive than if they could get into an apartment, but they lack the first and last month's rent, security deposit, that kind of initial down payment of funding, if you will, that would get them into housing, which is why there are programs that are called rapid rehousing programs, which are designed to help that particular group of people that have income and that are paying to live in a motel, but it would actually be a better situation for them and their families, and it would also be less expensive if you could overcome that initial hurdle of income and get them into an apartment. They can make the monthly apartment rent, they just can't come up with first and last and a security deposit. So all that just speaks to the fact that those kind of programs exist, speak to the reality that housing presents economic challenges for a large percentage of people and in the state, and that impacts every segment of the housing market, from first-time home buyers to college graduates to people on the very bottom end that are struggling with homelessness, that have some income, that have some ability to pay, but just not an ability to pay market rent.
Okay. My other question was on the minors on the next page. Like, how old were they? The two minors that you encountered?
We could look that up. Yeah. So they were under 18. So that's all we have in the data is that we confirmed that they were under 18, so that they were minors. But we could look up those situations. I know that the case managers, whenever we come across situations like that, we work really hard to do what we can to get them connected to shelter.
The homeless, the 80% or higher being homeless 1 year or more. That's 20% that were within the last year became homeless.
Correct.
So that 20%, like, what was the profile? I know you give the overall profile of what was the profile of that 20%? Like, why did they become homeless? Was it the affordability? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, we could go back and look at the data and actually answer that question. Because we asked a relatively open-ended question about the significant experience that led to the homelessness, and so we could compile a list of those answers and cross-reference it with that group of people. We haven't done that in the report, but we can do that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that to see what's the cause for the latest, right? So we can hopefully get ahead and prevent them before. But also, I'm interested in the trend for the long term, like the ones that have been homeless for greater than 10 years. Are they continuing to be homeless because of mental health issues, substance abuse, or is it still financial? Like, I'd be interested in that trend.
Yeah, okay.
The reality is that the reasons that people become homeless are not often the reasons people struggle to continue to not be successfully finding housing. Oftentimes, those are different issues from what originally caused it to what's perpetuating the challenges they're facing.
And that's one thing that I'm absolutely, interested in, right? Because I think once you get into that trend, the possibility of becoming, ensnared with drugs or other items that keep you, like you said, in that.
Correct.
So.
Functional zero is the term that we like to use, that's a HUD term again. Functional zero is that homelessness would be brief and non-recurring and infrequent. Infrequent, brief, and non-reoccurring. So the goal would be is that a system like a municipality, like a city, would be able to catch folks within that 20% time frame through the systems that exist, efficiency brought there. That the reality is that those folks, again, the challenges in the state of California, we have 25% of the homeless population in the nation are in the state of California. So the challenge is it's the housing issues and some of those sort of bigger issues that are causing that. But if we can catch people there, they don't become those folks that have been out on the streets for 21 plus years.
Correct.
That's the goal.
And I think that's helpful, again, as we consider what types of solutions that go down. I mean,
immediate, near-term, and definitely long-term situations.
On the case management side, that was fascinating, and I'm hoping to get some clarity from you in terms of 78% expressed an interest in working with you on a case management plan. I'd like to get some clarity. What does that mean? Does that mean that 22% were never exposed, reached out to, they didn't know that resources existed? Can you clarify that?
I think you're asking, why would anyone say no to that question? Or why do we suspect that people said no to that question?
The way I'm interpreting that response, that metric, is that you engage people, and 78% said, I will accept your offer of help.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happened? That's I expected less, frankly. I thought that's a high number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out, what does that mean? Does that mean that that 78% were not offered help before?
No, the question is, the question simply was, are you interested in case management with CityNet? And then they could answer no, yes, don't know, or they could refuse. So, and sometimes, and obviously if people ask, well, what does that mean? We would tell them, okay, well, we are a nonprofit. We've been contracted by the city. We work to help connect people like you to the resources that exist within the continuum of care, whatever you're interested in, whether that's education or job training. Typically it's housing. We'll connect you and help you overcome those barriers and get you connected. And that'll be a long-term process, and we'll work with you on that. We'll explain it if they ask that question. A lot of times, it's the last question, and sometimes people are ready for the survey to be done, and so they just say, no, thank you. I think most often it's that people they have a feeling that they can resolve their homelessness on their own, that they've got a plan in mind to self-resolve. In either case, we let them know. We give them a card with a phone number, and we one of those outreach line numbers, so that they can call us and let them know that either way, we're happy to entertain their call, and if they want help, we will come out and make an appointment and visit with them.
I'm just the reason I maybe I'm not being clear. I'm just surprised because there's a lot of points that, to my knowledge, these population groups get outreach to, right? You have LASA, you have different organizations that come out.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they told you, yes, I'll accept your help, what happened with the ones before? Did they not offer help to them, or have they not been engaged? Like, that seems really high.
No, I see your question. So I would say no. I think it's more an issue of people who are, our experience is that people who are in crisis, that they'll, it's sort of any port in a storm. They'll, if we can help them, they're happy to work with us. If others can offer help, they would say yes to that as well.
Correct.
So, and our, we've worked, in the community meetings, a lot of what we've done in case conferencing is to avoid duplications. We've worked with local agencies, Kingdom Causes and others within the continuum of care to make sure that we are filling gaps, so that when we offer case management services, ideally, all one of the 172 would be connected to a local nonprofit, and we would take some and others would take some. We're sort of, we're happy to work with to fill whatever gap that exists. We're not looking to steal clients from anyone else or dump our clients on anyone else. It's really just we want everyone to be connected with a case manager for a case management plan. But I think people would say yes to that because it's an indication that they just want help. And so whoever comes and whoever can help me out of my crisis, I will accept that. I will work with that person. It's not, I don't think it's a statement of one agency over and against another. I think it's more a statement of when somebody's in a dire situation, they're looking to end their condition of homelessness.
I appreciate your delicate response. I still,
Mayor Pro Tem Garza, if I may add, I think one of the factors also is that when they're asked the question, it's just basically a survey question, and it's going to be, I'm sure that the response is going to change later on once you go into the actual case management, where do you actually give them, offer them help. And at that point, that number will go down, because I firmly believe that some homeless will not accept assistance eventually. So they just say yes, case management, but they don't know exactly what it means.
yeah, it just, to me, it's just high. It's just, the way I'm interpreting it, until somebody proves me wrong, is that either somebody's not doing their job out there and not actually offering help, or if they are, they're not doing it effectively. I'm just being frank, because that's a really high number to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to state for the record, I don't agree with that.
Yeah. So, yeah. So let's, I saw the demographic comparisons that you have. I was really surprised with the veteran numbers, that they were so low, which is good.
Mhm.
And then there's a chart 7, duration to homelessness.
Can I just say, because we didn't put that on this slide,
Okay.
but the veterans number was 7%. So the N was 125. The number of people that answered that question was 125, and 93% answered that they had no military service. 7% answered that they did.
Yeah. On the correlation of the duration to homelessness, the ones that have been homeless for, let's say, 6 years or longer, because I know it's 18, like 34%, if my number's right. So 34% of respondents that have been homeless in our city for 6 years or longer. So did you find any like that? I'd be interested in that trend again to see why it is that they continue to be homeless for so long. I'm trying to see just correlations. And then what else do I have? And then I know that I don't think you put it in here in terms of your recommendations that you're pointing out. But I'm thinking we can talk about those soon. In terms of the trends that you saw with us, the results, is that like in line with what you're seeing in other cities that you provide services in, that you've conducted censuses in? Trying to see where we fall in that spectrum.
Yeah, I think our team has discussed that, and we're sort of continue. So this sort of kind of baseline for us. We'll obviously monitor that trend as we kind of move forward and continue to get to the nuances. But I think as our team initially sort of looked at it, the only thing that sort of jumped out at us, and again, this is would be sort of the substance abuse question that seemed to be a little bit higher than sort of what we have normally seen. Men, women, that's typically 70-30. I forget what the actual number is without looking at my notes. But most of the data seemed consistent, even the numbers being higher than the point in time count. Again, that seemed consistent in terms of what we're seeing in Plug and Play the City in Southern California. These are broader dynamics. Solutions are going to have to be regional. This is not a Bellflower only. I mean, like, you're to be commended for sort of grabbing the bull by the horns and sort of what can we learn, and the more specific, the better. But this will have regional solutions without a doubt, and that's what we're beginning to see emerge in neighboring cities. So we'll continue to sort of, the data sort of speaks, but then we're also going to have some recommendations, I'm sure, as we get into some of the nuances of what's happening in particular intersections, for example. There may be things going on there that we will kind of continue to either address ourselves as we talk to individuals or begin to make a bigger conversation here in the city as we go.
I think, and the only thing I would add to that is, it's actually on this slide, is that the 1 year and 2 years and less is that's about what we see, about 50%. But, you know, that 6 years and above category is higher than what we see other places. So it suggests that there's a large percentage of individuals that have been homeless for a very long time. And those tend to be really challenging cases to solve, because there's, you know, the longer that a person is homeless, you know, statistics would show that they're more likely to be a victim of crime. They're more likely to engage in crime. They're more likely to develop mental health issues and addictions and substance abuse issues. And so then you've got to undo a lot of those things that have developed over time. So I think that's one of the sobering things from this, is that group from 6 all the way up to 21 plus years is a sizable portion of the whole.
Yeah, 1 out of 3. Is that right? And I'm guessing, and that's why I'm looking for the validation. I'm guessing that that's the visible, right, homeless population that people in our community know. They
Oftentimes,
right.
yeah. Correct.
And so I'm really curious to see what their challenges are, so that we can address those, right? And I at this point, until I know what the cause is, I can't, you know, come up with my colleagues and discuss a solution for them, right? So.
It's a good question, and we can go back and cross-reference that group with some of those other factors.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, and also the ones that are like 0 to 2 years.
There are probably multiple factors for the long-term ones, right? Not just, you know, more short-term housing loss or something like that. I'm thinking that probably evolved over years. Would you?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and we would also look, you know, we'd be interested in looking at that group and look at income. So, you know, the degree to which they're accessing healthcare, the degree to which they're accessing CalFresh, how does that compare to the norm? Because you can potentially target some interventions depending on what you find in those areas.
But that's not to say, though, that there's not hope. I mean, could give you story after story of individuals who've been on the streets for 14, 24 years, those sorts of circumstances, and it was sort of a family breakdown. As simple as, we just lost track. That'd be a common story. We had no idea where Brad was. And so sort of through some mysterious, you know, story that I always tell is that one time I heard from a church group that had prayed with the individual that reminded them of, he asked for prayer for his sister in Camarillo. That was the breakthrough conversation that they never shared with a case manager. And yet that became the point of connection, that this individual, we found out that they had a relative nearby that had lost track of them. So there could be lots of different ways. Now, it doesn't mean that those hurdles become any less challenging for the individual, but a lot of what happens the more you get down here is you sort of, your tribe, if you will, that you sort of run with becomes not necessarily supportive of your choosing a different path. And sometimes the breakdowns that exist for people that find themselves in these situations is really the underlying challenge.
So I just have two more things. So the first one is, yeah, I'm really, again, that 78%, frankly, it resonates with me a lot because the fact that they've said, yes, I want your help, to me, that's huge because hopefully that's the first step, right, in connecting these people with help and hopefully getting them off this cycle, right? So, and that's, I think, as human beings, that's what we want. We don't want them out there. We want to connect them with help. And if they didn't know help existed and they're accepting your offer, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, being such a high number to me, that's great.
The number in the, was highly publicized, but when our team was working in the flood control channel just outside the city border of Anaheim, right by Anaheim Stadium, and the flood control channel right there. Similarly, when you had that sort of private one-on-one conversation, 82.3% of those people said, if you can get me out of here. Maybe not when they're sitting around, but when you go have that one-on-one, they said, if there's any way you can get me out of here, like, what do I got to do? Like, this is not what I dreamt I was going to do.
Yeah.
And here I find myself. And so it sort of speaks to, people want help. Sort of maybe kind of, that does mean that there are people that no matter what you offer them, we have those stories as well. But the reality is most people out there, if there was a means to a better day, they would seek it out.
And then the last question I have, Mr. Mayor, is for our city attorney. Mr. Attorney, just if you don't mind, just right quick, I know that, and I say this usually in public, that we as members of the council and as staff, we're a little more aware, right, of the nuances of things that sometimes our residents aren't. So I was going to ask you for just a quick little primer on the legal situation with regards to the homelessness discussion at the 9th District, like the limitations that we have cities have now that we didn't have before, pending still, cases potentially being appealed to the Supreme Court at this point. But if you could just share with our public a little bit of what we're encountering as cities.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think this was discussed perhaps earlier this year, late last year. There was a case that came down from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in September of last year. It's entitled or captioned Martin versus City of Boise, Boise being Boise, Idaho. That case was subsequently reheard by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in April of this year, and the previous opinion was replaced with a new opinion, which is about the same as the old opinion. To sum up the lengthy case, there's a question now about whether or not most cities' anti-camping regulations are valid or not, and under what circumstances. Our office has already prepared a draft ordinance and draft staff report, and we have not presented that to the City Council yet for consideration because the City of Boise is appealing the decision of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court to see if the U.S. Supreme Court will, first of all, hear the case, and second of all, see what happens if it does. In essence, it throws many of the regulations of cities throughout the nation, really, with regard to camping, loitering, homeless, or typical regulations that have been used against people that don't have regular homes into question, and has limited, at least in the eyes of law enforcement, the ability of law enforcement to utilize those regulations to try to keep parks clear and to keep sidewalks clear and that type of thing. I can't predict which way the court will go, although with this administration, as you know, there have been 2 new appointments to the U.S. Supreme Court, so it's more probable than not that I think that that particular case will be taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court for at least some consideration. What happens ultimately is unknown at this point, but whatever happens will be 2 or 3 years from now, even if the U.S. Supreme Court were to take up the case. Again, we've already prepared suggested draft documents. We just haven't brought them to the City Council pending what happens with this particular case at the federal level.
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, put that as a background to our residents so that they're aware that it's a moving target. There's many factors that contribute to this. And so as a residents are seeing an increase in general of homeless or of people that are out in the streets, living in the streets, and sometimes they they interpret that as the inaction of cities or inaction of law enforcement of moving people along. That's not the case. I mean, there's that, but there's also the increased pressures of housing and mental health and all these different factors that are contributing to that. So I just wanted to present that as a foundation.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the League of California Cities has actually encouraged cities to consider whether or not to file a so-called friend of the court letter with the U.S. Supreme Court asking for it to take up review of this particular case. So I mentioned that only in passing.
No, thank you. I'm involved in that myself as president of the league, so I'm absolutely involved in that discussion at this point in time. So I'll get back to you on what we decide to do, whether if we do an amicus now or if we wait till it's actually accepted by the Supreme Court to do it at that point. But
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt. The only request from the league at this point is to file a brief letter with the court asking for it to take up what's called cert or certiorari, which means that it's discretionary on behalf of the U.S. Supreme Court whether or not to take up cases for consideration. So it's at the stage now where the Supreme Court has not determined whether or not to take up the case. So these letters would be encouragement for the court to do so.
thank you, Mr. City Attorney. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Coops?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thanks for coming. We're glad you're here. And I'm encouraged about, accept all of the data that you have given to us because it's consistent, sounds like, with what you found in other cities. Explain what you might think to the general public, how it is that we will try to, I'm interested in what we talked about, the rapid housing, where there is a chance where you have someone that, and I've met many people that I've interviewed at service stations and stuff where they come out and wash their windshield, and they live in a motel, and they're paying $30, $40 a day, which is more than they would spend if they had an actual place to live. If they had a couple $1,000s, they could get into a place permanently. Rapid housing. To me, that would be something that would really be something that we can get our information into and help people with. That might even be called low-hanging fruit. How do you assess that, those that are out there? That it probably, when I look at their map of the city, they're kind of migrating towards the lower-end motels. And give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it tends to be an effective program because the long-term outcomes of those kinds of rapid rehousing programs are very good. As a general rule in this line of work, people who are sheltered tend to work very hard to stay sheltered, and they don't want to go back. So if they leave the streets and are even an emergency shelter, but certainly in an apartment, they're going to work very hard to maintain their housing. It's typically the last thing that they let go of on becoming homeless is that they do everything they can to maintain their housing. So the long-term outcomes of rapid rehousing programs are good. It tends to be a significant initial cost because you're paying, $3,000 to $5,000 a family, to come up with first and last month's rent. We've actually had to, in many cases, do double deposits to encourage landlords to rent to formerly homeless tenants. Because occupancy rates are so low that when a unit comes available, there's typically a line of people that are wanting to rent that unit, and a homeless neighbor who, may have unemployment or an eviction or any kind of things on their record don't tend to naturally rise to the top of the list. So agencies like ours are actually investing in positions called either housing navigators and or housing locators, which are people that will help homeless neighbors who are holding vouchers or who are engaged in rapid rehousing to find a landlord that will complete the circle, that will complete the other side of that transaction on our behalf. So what that means from a financial standpoint is very often, incentives to the landlords like double deposit. So it can work. It's a great solution. It's not a great solution for everybody. Because, as we mentioned, there's a significant percentage of population that's disabled. There's a significant percentage of this population that has no income at all. So we're very supportive of the program as it exists, and I think that there are resources that come down from HUD for rapid rehousing because HUD it's one of the programs that HUD looks at and says this is a program worth funding.
Oh, and that was my thought was when we engaged your services that we can through these reports, determine who it is that has these kinds of issues and that can be dealt with in a way that's logical. When we look at a third of the population on the street has been out there 6 years or more, and I don't know how far you've looked into the services that are offered by those churches and individuals in the city. Bellflower being the friendly city, we may be offering services to those that are on the street that are above and beyond other cities, where it's easier to be homeless in Bellflower for 6 years than it is to be in other cities. I don't know if you've discovered, or if that's the next phase, because you talked about when we initiated the conversation that you wanted to try to direct the servicers, churches, for instance, to be a little bit more selective in the kinds of services they offer as to what would make people be able to get off the street rather than just perpetuate the problem. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, speaking to the story that I told about that individual, I mean, oftentimes faith communities in particular, particularly ones that sort of go out of their way, sort of their rhythm of life to sort of, are often some of the strongest relational ties. So as we talk about, just moving somebody into an apartment, oftentimes can be very challenging because there's sort of no community. So tapping into those groups, and we have often found in many, many cases where if we can provide sort of the case management, but keep that bridge built when it comes to those move-in costs. We've often found very willing partners to say, oh, you mean homelessness becomes a person, which is what really these numbers are actually individuals, as you know. But when it becomes helping Brad stay in his unit and they know me or they know this individual, that's a very strong tie. And we've often seen many, many of those cases, whereas if we can find a case management, we will very much so go and find their community ties and see if we can build a partnership there.
So have you been successful in getting churches to change the way that they do business that would be a more one-on-one, let's
sure.
adopt and nurture this situation as to what, just like a shotgun and throw all the bread on the water and hope for the best?
For sure. I think that, yes, absolutely. I mean, part of what I think is often the case is some of those families that are living in margins. So should we shut down food programs in general? We have found, and we will position ourselves at many of these gatherings, we call them in-reaches. So if you ever see the word pop up in our reports that we've decided to strategically for the next 3 months do an in-reach, meaning we will go staff a table at a particular congregation that's doing sort of regular ongoing. And so we provide the housing component. What we'll realize is that many of the families that take advantage of those are not necessarily homeless. They're just families living on the margins. So we wouldn't necessarily say, go shut down all these things, because those are often families.
There's a place for that as well.
There's a place for that.
But again, this data helps us determine that need.
For sure.
Well, and it helps us because we have a by name list, right? We can look and we can work with the church and talk through particular cases. As Brad mentioned, the churches in many cases are sort of the de facto prevention and diversion programs for homelessness. They're what's preventing and diverting people from becoming homeless, because families who are on the margin and are short on money, they can go get groceries or they can go get emergency supplies from the faith community, and therefore they can pay their rent. And so we've appreciated and benefited from those partnerships, both for the access and sort of the relationships to the HUD level homeless, but also just to appreciate the work that those communities are doing to prevent and divert people from falling into homelessness.
But it would be fair as an ordained pastor, which I am, there is a case to be made that oftentimes those groups are not necessarily as equipped to sort of navigate as a person who got into this line of work, as a person that was working with my particular faith community to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, realizing that, wow, there's a lot more to this than just peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Oftentimes we build those bridges and sort of they are willing to partner with those that can help navigate the system without them all becoming social workers themselves.
Many of the calls we all receive are many times constituents who have observed a consistent individual or individuals at a particular place and time, and they are they're not an asset to the community, let's put it that way. And people are ashamed of it, and when their neighbors or their friends come to visit from the areas and they see this going on in the corner, and they have to try to explain it away, and they call us and say, well, this is embarrassing. I'm trying to live in a nice house, a nice place, and here I have this kind of a situation. And I think Joel has probably, hopefully that Joel, and maybe Kingdom Cause as well, has pointed out to you those individuals that certainly have chronic situations where you can always find them on a certain street corner at a certain time, maybe all the time. is there any concerted effort to try to work with, the really difficult homeless situations? And where is that in the priority of things to be done?
Yeah, great question, and yes, I mean, it has been our focus, and it will continue to be our focus. We're very open to input from council again, we always encourage people to call law enforcement, the non-emergency number, and direct that. We work in partnership with law enforcement, and, many times we would be dispatched with them potentially. But we are very interested in sort of knowing those concerns so that we can go and address them. There may be reasons why a particular intersection has got, for example, SEPTED principles that we could work with local businesses that maybe are sort of helping to sort of facilitate, side deals, if you will. Local businesses that say, they're kind of at their wits' end, and so their answer is just, leave when I open up my business, and we'll call it even. That's not necessarily a great best practice. So working with business owners like that, that's saying, well, when you leave, this now turns into an approved place that lots of people come hang out, and they may or may not be doing negative things per se. Those kind of things, we'll get into some of the weeds of, we will begin to focus on those. So we're open to that now. So if you have particular areas that you think you have constituents that are talking about that, we would love to know that as well. And we could begin to do some, again, we might prioritize and focus
No,
those
and I
with
think
public
that's
safety.
important. But part of the reason why, when we did the survey that brought this whole idea forward, is that I think Bellflower is a compassionate city. I think
Right.
all cities are, basically. But when it gets to the point where nothing changes and it's just the same, and
Understand.
say, isn't there something we can do to help that individual?
Correct.
And I think we'd all give you a list that's probably consistent as to what's going on there. How has your relationship been with law enforcement? As you did the survey, I assume that you were with them many times, your employees, to engage those that needed to be dealt with and polled. Has that been a positive relationship?
Yeah, it's been very positive and very productive. Certainly, law enforcement's a big part of our sort of strategy to reach homeless and engage homeless neighbors in the city. So, in addition to the census, we've been engaged in weekly outreaches with law enforcement from the first week. And to speak to your earlier question, to form relationships with those that kind of were on the initial list of people that we wanted to engage on behalf of the city, just because we know that those take time, so we wanted to get started as quickly as we could. So Brad mentioned earlier the list of 9, and that's the list that we got from the city of those 9. And we're forming relationships, and we hope to have some good news on some of those cases in the coming months as we're making progress in a number of fronts with them. But those are, law enforcement is critical to the equation from our perspective because they provide access and security, as I've mentioned, but also local knowledge. So there's a knowledge base that exists within law enforcement because law enforcement and homeless neighbors are the only 2 constituency groups in the population that are on the streets 24/7. So they get to know each other, and they know when people are open to help and when they're not, and when when there's an opening there, they can help us and direct us in.
I've always been amazed when I go on a ride along how the deputies can identify an individual, and they're already typing the date of birth into the computer because if there are any warrants or what they've been doing or where you live and how's your mother, what did you see last night? I mean, there's a whole society out there that I know that your group can use their knowledge to help.
Absolutely. Both sheriff and public safety, or public safety team here in the city, I mean, between this sort of team that exists, we plan on utilizing them in a strong partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Coops. Councilmember Dunn.
I would just like to make a comment. This is a very good report. All of us got the full report emailed to us last week, so for the audience benefit, there's a lot more data in this report, and it was very interesting. And I do know that the numbers that we're seeing are just the first census. There's a lot of trust and relationships that have to get built with the engagement of CityNet and the homeless population. And I do foresee a lot of these numbers possibly changing. It's going to be work in progress or whatever. But as a first starting point, this is excellent. And I think we're off to something that no other city in this area has to try to address something. And with that, thank you for what you're done. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I know that one of the questions that I'll be asking you is what's the next step? How
Yeah.
do we move forward? Before I do that, I just want to kind of share a few thoughts here in terms of the report that you put together. It's very comprehensive, and I know for our benefits of our residents, homelessness it's not a good issue. But let us assure you that we are doing something about it. That's why we engage the service of CityNet. At the same time, homelessness is, I kind of firmly believe that homelessness, there's going to be people who will be homeless forever. I mean, I think it's a matter of fact because I've worked in Skid Row for 5 years, and it kind of breaks my heart to find some people who are not willing to accept the service that they're being provided to them. So I came to the realization that there'll be at some point in time, at any point in time, there's going to be homeless in our country, in our city. So that's a fact of life. Our goal is to reduce it to a level that they're not an annoyance to our residents. That's the key. And part of that is, I know the solution that I've been hearing about from a lot of our politicians is create housing, put them to housing. And I kind of subscribe to the idea that even if you give a homeless person a house, free and clear, just free housing, okay? The title is his. As long as there's no income to support it, that person's going to be dependent forever because that person has to pay for utilities, to buy food, and to buy for other expenses, the basic necessities of life. So the key is the income. And if you step back before the income problem came about, there's some possibly, just like what your survey said, there were issues like substance abuse, disabilities, mental issues. So these are issues that created, to me, one of the common path is there were some issues in terms of being disabled, mental health issue, or substance abuse that caused the person to lose his job or her job. And once that job is lost, then the income stream stops. And that most likely created homeless because he or she cannot afford anymore to pay the rent or to pay the mortgage, and before you know it, that person is homeless. So I just want to kind of put that in that kind of perspective that in whatever solution that we can come up with, we kind of address those issues that homeless is not the prime issue, okay? Because again, if you give them a house free of charge, if they don't have any income to support themselves, because eventually they have to pay for property tax, utilities, right? So if there's no income for them to pay property tax, eventually the government will take over the property for non-payment of property tax. Simple as that. So you were asking us in terms of if we have some kind of suggestions and things like that. The first thing that I would like you to kind of address is it really breaks my heart to find that there are 2 kids out there being homeless. I would put priority on those 2 kids to make sure that they find a home. Okay. I know that we have some services with Caring Connections. I don't know if that's something that you can utilize, but that will be my number 1 priority is make sure that there are no kids that are homeless out in the street. The second thing is veterans. I know that the previous administration put so much emphasis in veterans. I think their motto is there shouldn't be any homeless veteran by a certain year, something like that. Had we passed that year already? There was a target year that they set a goal in the Obama administration. They set a goal that by this year there shouldn't be any more homeless veterans.
Homelessness is a cause that responds to resource, so a focus which nationally and locally veterans has been, because nobody should,
I know.
You'd have hard pressed to find anybody who said kids should be homeless or veterans would be homeless. I mean, most of the time, although some of the veterans that we've met, just to sort of maybe counterbalance that. I mean, there was a veteran who was the last guy in the flood control channel, again by Anaheim Stadium, who said, "I will be the last one out. That's my duty as a Marine." is I will be the last one out, and everyone goes before me. So, but helping to bring what we hope to do with the by name list and sort of what we've been able to do is, to the degree that we've been able to sort of build these relationships, and if we're one of the teams or the primary team or the lead team that's sort of out on the streets and keeping track of where these veterans are, we will bring the veteran resources to the degree. If we know where they're at, we can bring them, instead of doing a fair at a church parking lot, we can actually bring those resources to a laundry on Lakewood Boulevard if that's where we know that we need to get some folks. So that's kind of how we'll use that. So veterans, yes,
I'm just bringing it up because there's sufficient resources
Right.
to help them.
very true.
I mean, if any segmented population of homeless,
Without a
they're
doubt.
the most
Yep.
supported by the government.
There is national movement to end veteran homelessness in
Right.
the U.S. without
Yeah,
a doubt.
and again, I'm really, it breaks my heart again to say that we have 7% of the population that you surveyed are veterans. And the other thing is, if you look at the chart here, I would kind of focus also, put some kind of emphasis on this cluster here, these two big clusters. And the reason that's Alondra and Lakewood, and this is under the freeway, I believe, right? That's what you said earlier. What I'm trying to prevent here is the creation of an homeless encampment. Okay, so the sooner we can address this issue, then the less homeless here, then the sooner it's going to be a lot easier to deal with it. Because I don't want to be in a situation wherein the population gets bigger and bigger and becomes out of control. I mean, just look at what happens to Skid Row now. I mean, it's almost kind of hopeless. I think. I don't know. They're trying to solve it today, but again, the problem just kind of exacerbated over the last few years. And then finally, I would put emphasis on some who are chronic homeless that Councilmember Coops mentioned. I mean, they have names already. We know them by names. So, and they are, and I think based on your survey, you would know who they are, right? Okay, so that will be my suggestion. Council, if you have any other suggestions, I think they're looking for some suggestions, right?
Ongoing, I mean, we'll continue to do outreach. We'll continue to work collaboratively with agencies. We'll continue to add cases to our list and hopefully exit onto sort of the next best step for all those that we are working with. That number will continue to grow without a doubt. And then community engagement to the degree that we can be helpful. Again, sometimes some of this information of, like, for example, the residency dynamic and the local connections, those oftentimes could be very helpful for the community to hear. So if there can be a rhythm where we could go out, we'd be willing to help with that messaging as well.
And this is a dynamic process. You don't need to give them full direction
Yeah.
tonight. We can do this periodically and
Yeah.
extra field house and come in any time that we want to.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are your next steps now? How do we go forward from here?
Well, so today represents a transition for us. This is sort of our case management phase. This is sort of where we've sort of learned and created our baseline. Now we will continue to work cases.
Well, the
look at-
contract's pretty clear. If you remember, the first 90 days of this was.
I know, but
30
I'm just
days.
asking them for the benefit
Right,
of
yeah.
our audience. I mean, how do they go forward from this point on?
Yeah. I mean,
Do their program.
yeah, we will do case management, and we'll prioritize the cases, and we'll continue to be a presence on the street. I mean, that's what we'll do from here.
The other thing I would add is, and we've learned a lot in the first 90 days, but we recognize that we have more to learn about the county continuum of care. So the other side of the equation is one side is forming relationships with people that are willing to accept resources. The other side of the equation is understanding what resources are available and maximizing them. So that's the other point of learning that we've embarked on in the first 90 days, and we'll continue with that. So that just to make sure that homeless neighbors in Bellflower have access to all of the local and regional resources, housing and other resources.
In terms of staffing, you have one full-time employee and one part-time. Is that right? If I recall correctly.
Yeah, we have about
Or two
3
full-time.
bodies that are here, depending on
bodies,
the
okay.
circumstances and situations. We do bring out a van. That was part of our original conversations. Due to the transportation dynamics that are true to LA County, we bring one of our vans when our team comes out here. So we have 2 people driving in a van. You might have seen it in some of the pictures there. Wherever it is here. So we will, there it is. The equivalent, so our contract, I forget the exact equivalent, I actually have it here. Two FTEs, so we're putting 80 hours worth of work into it on a weekly basis. Depending on where we're at, for example, we have a housing navigation team that when it comes to getting people in an apartment and stabilized. We have a different staff team that specializes in that will come in and wrap themselves around those cases as needed.
Okay,
So it's a contingent. We'll bring what we need when we need it.
all right. Mayor Pro Tem Garza, go ahead.
Let me turn this on. And I know we're not at this point yet, but because I know you've gone from doing this initial assessment to now you've been doing some work already, but I know now we're gonna start getting a little busier. In your conclusions page, which was noted before that was given to us as a council, you recommended 3 things: the increase in low threshold bridge housing services, also deploying behavioral health outreach and engagement workers more frequently, and then providing services that target those with significantly deteriorated physical health, mental health, and social skills. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, do we need those now? Do you want to do your services first?
Yeah.
And then see as things evolve which one of these we start? I think as a council member, I want to provide you the resources to succeed, not only for you to succeed, but also to help these population groups get sheltered and get out of the street. Because again, it pains me every single day when we have somebody sleeping in the street.
Remember, members of the council, Mr. Garza, this is a presentation, not an action
Correct.
item. So we have to be very limited in what we can.
No, absolutely. No, thank you. No, and so I'm not. So I'm just putting it out there so that the public doesn't go away thinking, or my colleagues go away thinking that it's just a presentation. That's it. So I want to hear from you. Like, what do you for now? What is your proceeding okay for now, and then come back and see how things kind of pan out?
I think yes. That's what we'd like to do.
Okay.
Because I do think that again, this is an exercise. This data tells a story, and we want the data to drive sort of decisions. And so if from looking at this data, those would be the things that would be necessary to address the gaps in the system or the challenges. Sort of how that's going, we'll continue to monitor that. We'll engage that, and we'll figure that out as we go.
Okay, great. I'm fine with that. So thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Manager.
All
Thank you,
right,
Mr. Mayor.
Any other question?
And I
Just,
would-
just,
Go ahead.
just a
Councilmember Dunn.
comment, maybe staff can email us the contract so we know what the scope of work is, because this is just a presentation, not an interrogation.
No, not yet. All right, Councilmember Coops.
So I think you understand how important this is to this council.
Mm-hmm.
And so if any point in time, and I'm going to speak on behalf of all of us, if you want to engage us, don't hesitate, either in this forum or individually. This is a priority. We want to succeed on this. We want you to succeed, and we take this very serious. And so don't be timid on your requests, on what you found out or what you want to know. When am I saying the right thing, guys? This is important to us. And we want to make sure that we become a good example of what can be done when a city puts their resources in the right direction.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Councilmember Hamada?
Raymond. Just quickly, thank you again. But again, you guys are helping us paint the big picture here. And again, I would echo some of those comments. Is don't hesitate to contact staff and us, but also and may also necessitate going to the next level, which the county people too. So, and I think we're possibly ready to move on them too, to create some again, hopefully solid solutions to deal with this. So, and everybody needs to keep talking on this and keep learning. Again, this is a lot of information, and it's great to start figuring out that puzzle we've been faced with, and things are starting to fit, and there's still a lot of work, and it's me, I like puzzles, but I don't like 2,000 piece puzzles. 500, good, easy. But keep at it, guys, and hopefully we'll create some recommendations and solutions that everybody else is going to look to that again take care of this this urban woe that we have here. So all right, okay, thanks guys.
Okay, just again, finally, I just want to thank you for what you have done so far, and I expect a lot. We expect a lot more from you, and I'll be very honest with you. I was prepared for the worst in terms of what your report will contain, and actually, it was better than what I expected. So, okay, with that, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is an update on the pending housing legislation by Miss Elizabeth Corpus.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This presentation tonight is just to go over some of the key bills that are pending in front of the California legislature. I will note that all of these bills are pending still on the various committees. They haven't gone to a final vote. They haven't gone to the governor's office yet. And in regards to these bills, it does relate to housing. Some of these bills could significantly impact the way the city restricts certain developments. It does have impacts on parking, density, and other land use items. And so to briefly go over each one, the first bill is SB 330. This bill establishes a maximum of half a parking space per unit for housing projects, regardless if it's adjacent to a transit center. It also establishes a 0 parking space requirement if the housing development is within a quarter mile of a rail stop. This bill would restrict enforcement of building codes for 7 years. What this means is that if there is a violation, a code enforcement violation for a housing unit that's occupied, if that violation is not necessary to protect the health and safety of the unit, then it is possible that the enforcement of the building codes be delayed for up to 7 years. This bill creates a preliminary housing application. It's unclear what is meant by preliminary, but I do understand that it would be a rather incomplete application. Once a developer submits this preliminary housing application, it would freeze all impact fees, and it would limit the amount of hearings that are required to approve the project.
What is the status of that bill right now?
Currently, give me one sec. It's pending the Assembly Local Government Committee. So if it passes, then it goes on to the Senate Appropriations Committee.
So, yeah.
I think it has to get out of committee this week. If it doesn't by Friday, it's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Actually, it's in assembly right now, local government. It would, if it gets out of committee this week, then next month it would go to assembly appropriations. Yep. And then if that happens, then, but yeah, it's we're hoping that it doesn't leave local government this week.
Wasn't there a
Yeah.
big push to kind of defeat that bill? There was a big push, right?
SB 50 is the one that we stopped. This one is the next big one that we're trying to stop.
Okay.
Where is Skinner from?
I do not know.
She's in the Bay Area. Yeah.
The Bay Area. Yeah, all right. Okay.
SB 5, this establishes the Affordable Housing and Community Development Investment Program. This creates a new committee, and it would allow cities to apply to participate in a program where there is, where there is funding available for affordable housing projects. What this bill creates is a committee that can approve or deny projects that meet specific criteria. So cities can apply for funding under this program. It goes to a newly formed committee to either approve or deny the project. And there's specific funding that would go along with it as long as certain criteria are met. SB 6, this would allow for the Department of HCD to create a list of all local lands suitable and available for residential development. This list would then go to the Department of General Services to create a database of that information and make it available and searchable for the public. AB 1279. This would allow for HCD to designate areas as high resource areas. This means an area of high opportunity and low residential density that is not currently experiencing gentrification and displacement, and that is not at high risk of future gentrification and displacement. So HCD would designate these areas in our city. This bill would allow housing development to be permitted by right in high resource area, again, if certain criteria are met. So for example, if there is an area in our city that's zoned for single family development, if there is a project that is affordable to households making 100% of the area median income, then that development could build up to 4 residential units. And again, that would be in a single family zone. So that's just one example of what this bill would do.
Can I chime in on this just right quick? So this bill was going to be the one that we thought was going to replace SB 50, the bill from Wiener. And so this bill moved along from the Assembly to the Senate, but when it got to the Senate, it got assigned to 3 committees for consideration, and it only had a month, so it wasn't enough time, so they stalled it. So now it's going to be a 2-year bill. But it's still, like SB 50, it's still alive. It's just, it got continued to January. So.
The next bill is AB 1763. This requires cities to award a developer additional density, concessions, and incentives and height increases if 100% of the units are restricted to lower income households. So one example of this is if 100% of the total units in a project are affordable and that project is located within a half mile of a transit stop, they can have an unlimited density and have up to 3 additional stories above the height in the, allowed by the underlying zone. With this bill, it defines a major transit stop and also defines a high transit corridor. There's other examples as well, but just to give you an idea, the unlimited density and the higher height would result with this bill. Okay, and so the last 3 bills, they're related to accessory dwelling units. So as you may be aware, the city adopted an ADU ordinance back in 2017. There have been various attempts to change up these requirements, and I'll go through each one. AB 68, this would require that ADUs be ministerially approved, so an over-the-counter approval, no discretion from the Planning Commission or the City Council. With this specific bill, on lots that are developed with a single-family home, this bill would allow for 1 ADU that can be detached and 1 JADU. So potentially you can have a single-family home, an accessory dwelling unit, and a junior accessory dwelling unit. On lots that are developed with multiple family development, this bill would allow for multiple ADUs within livable space of an existing structure. So for example, if you currently have a duplex, this bill would allow that duplex to be converted into a 4-plex or a 5-plex or a 6-plex, and would also allow 2 detached ADUs on multifamily lots.
So how different is the junior ADU versus a regular ADU?
Junior ADUs are limited to conversions within an existing space, and there's a certain size requirements. So essentially, they're smaller in size than your ADUs, and they're required to be within existing space.
But still with bathroom and then
Still with
kitchen.
bathrooms and an efficiency kitchen and all that. With this bill, there would be limitations on the local ADU ordinance related to lot size, parking, and floor area. For example, cities would not be able to limit ADUs to lots of minimum size. For example, currently, we have a minimum lot size requirement, I believe, of either 7,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet. If this passes, we wouldn't be able to have that minimum lot size requirement. This would set a maximum ADU size that does not allow for an ADU of, the city cannot set a maximum ADU size that does not allow for at least an 800 square foot unit. The city would not be able to require replacement parking if parking is demolished to create an ADU. And the city cannot require setback for ADUs within existing structures and cannot require more than a 4-foot setback from any side or rear property line. JADUs would be allowed within a new single-family residence. And then lastly, this bill would create an enforcement mechanism. What this means is this would allow for HCD to review all of our local ordinances and provide comments based on what the city's proposing. They can provide comments relative to whether or not our local ordinance is in compliance with what they are requiring. Okay, the next bill that's related to ADUs is AB 881. And this would limit the criteria by which cities can determine where ADUs may be permitted. This would, again, allow for a ministerial approval of ADUs on lots with multiple family residences and within existing garages. This bill would prohibit cities from owner occupancy requirements. So our current ADU ordinance require that the owner live in one of the either the main unit or the ADU. This bill would prohibit that requirement. This bill also specifies that the measuring of half a mile from a public transit is measured in walking distance. So currently, the ADU ordinance does not require parking if you're within a half mile of a transit stop. This specifies that that half mile needs to be measured in walking distance. This bill adds a definition of public transit and also adds a definition of accessory structure. Lastly is SB 13. This requires cities to allow for garage conversions and carports to be converted to ADUs. It allows for garages or carports to be demolished for ADUs and prohibits the city from requiring replacement parking if those garages or carports are demolished. So very similar to one of the bills that was just mentioned. This also prohibits owner occupancy requirements and prohibits the city from imposing any development impact fees. Currently for ADUs, we do charge park fees and public facilities fees. This bill would prohibit cities from, or our city from impacting, or from imposing these development impact fees. So that's a summary of just some of the bills that are coming down the pipeline. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you have any comments, I'd be happy to answer, or be happy to take them.
I think my only comment here is after listening to all these bills that are pending in our in Sacramento, if our residents are complaining now about density, lack of parking, congestion, can you imagine if all these bills pass? There's going to be more issues with lack of parking, or density, and things like that. So I mean, fasten your seatbelt. That's all I can say, because a lot of these things hopefully will not happen, because it will just change our communities, not just Bellflower. Every community in California will be impacted by this.
If I can piggyback on your parking, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's funny. So there's a bill up there. I can't remember the name, the number. Maybe Randy can remember. The one that would prevent us from towing vehicles. It's AB 265, I believe. I can't remember. So it's not housing related, but it would prevent us to compound the parking problem. It would prevent us from towing vehicles. So yeah, just an FYI.
So
We have an opposed position on that.
So I would encourage those who are complaining about parking congestion in the city, please get hold of our legislators to make sure that these bills don't get passed. So please help. We can do some work in the city council, but if the residents call our legislators, I think it's going to be more impact. So please call them. All right. Any question for Elizabeth or? We're good. Okay. Thank you. Public comments, Mr. Stewart.
This is the time set aside for the public to address the city council on matters not listed on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the city council should come to the podium, be recognized by the mayor, and state your name for the record. If you wish to address the city council on an agenda item, you may do so by approaching the podium as we review that particular item. You'll be given a reasonable amount of time to address the city council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Members of the City Council. My name is Jesus Caneda. I came to leave some comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your hard work on the Steelcraft development, especially the promotion of downtown Bellflower. I've been really amazed by that. I think that as a marketing consultant of 6 years experience, you guys are doing a lot more than a lot of other cities are doing in that realm. The one thing I did want to share my concerns about was if anything is being done to address or look into the issue of possible gentrification, displacement of lower income residents. Again, I do live in the 4th District, and we are one of the lower median average income neighborhoods. I do worry about that because the development has been mostly concentrated in the downtown Bellflower area, and I do feel like we should kind of be branching out into the rest of our city. You know, it's funny because I try to come here as much as I can, and I always see the logo right there. It says, you know, growing together. So it's kind of difficult for me living there, and you know, I've just seen the cluster map of homeless people, and one of those is that area that I've raised concerns previously on. It's kind of hard to believe that we're growing together when a lot of our district requires what I believe is much needed commercial and retail development. So, you know, I don't know if anything's been being done to address that, but I would really appreciate any information regarding that.
You have any other comment? This is public comment section.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any other public comments?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any other comments for this
Oh.
because of the council?
No, that's all. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. We appreciate you taking the time to come up here. Are you going to sit down or?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I just want to address that concern because, again, this is public comment. So in terms of development, I understand that there's some concerns about the focus of the city being on downtown Bellflower, and that is very true. We focus on Bellflower conscientiously because as a city, back when about 6 to 8 years ago, we don't have a lot of resources to invest around the city, so we have to start somewhere. And we cannot start across town to develop the whole city at the same time because of lack of resources. So we made a conscious effort to focus first on downtown Bellflower, and then use that as a jumping off point to develop other areas. So we're almost there in terms of downtown Bellflower. I think it will sustain itself. And just for the benefit of our residents here and those on TV land, there are already some things happening around the city. There are housing developments on Artesia. There are 4 housing developments on Artesia Boulevard. And combining all those 4 developments, we're looking at about 120 units, residential units. That is a big development for that area in town. And if you look at Artesia also, along Artesia going west towards Clark and past Clark towards Lakewood, there are 3 hotel developments that are in the pipeline. And actually, we already approved the sale of a city property for the development of 2 hotels just west of Lakewood Boulevard on Artesia. So that is being developed. So things can start to happen now, since we are basically have focused on downtown. And then if you look at downtown, we've been very successful in downtown. So we are starting to branch out now, and you will see more developments out there in. And if you look also south of Artesia on Bellflower Boulevard, there's some movements there. We have In-N-Out, Dunkin' Donuts. The Exchange is putting out the development on the east side. Used to be J.C. Penney. So the rest of the city is not forgotten. It's just a matter of creating a jumping-off point using downtown to start the development of the city. So, okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Josh Murray. I'm here on behalf of Clifton Brackenseek Library, 9945 Flower Street. I'm here to promote our upcoming program on Saturday, August 3rd, 2019 from 2 to 3 p.m. We are having LA Dodgers story time. Attention Dodgers baseball fans, join us for a special story time with Los Angeles Dodgers alumni. Get autographs and photos and share a love of reading and baseball with the whole family. Be sure to wear your Dodgers blue. This program is presented in partnership with the Los Angeles Dodgers and Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. And this program is appropriate for families and children of all ages. I'll leave some flyers here at City Hall, and I am really sure this is going to be a really fun, exciting activity for all of the kids of the community. I hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Which Dodger's going to be there?
I came prepared. So our Dodgers alumni is Dennis Powell, who was a pitcher between 1983 and 1987.
Okay.
So that is they're sending various Dodgers alumni to different libraries throughout LA County, and Mr. Powell is our alumni.
Okay, thank you.
You know his record?
Anyone else?
You would know.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council.
Anita, welcome back. We missed you at the last meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Did you haven't coughed all night? Are you okay?
Yeah. Surprisingly, I did cough once. You missed it.
No, well, it was, you must be on
When
the
he was
road to
talking.
recovery.
Yeah, I've had a few health issues lately, but I'm getting better.
I can tell.
Thanks. On these bills that we were just talking about, I just want to confirm and verify with you. We contact Christina Garcia and Bob Archuleta about these, or is that who people have to call? They need to know who the representatives are.
Yes.
Hey, call them, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I don't have their numbers, but Christina Garcia, CRIS.
We'll get it to you.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow.
No, I was thinking maybe we could post them on the city website or
They are. I'll post it.
somewhere.
They're
They
posted
are?
on the
On
website now.
all the
Great,
elected officials.
okay.
Yeah,
I haven't been on there lately either because of my health, but I'm getting back.
all right. Good to
Okay, thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. Before we end the public comments, can I ask Mr. Joel Hockman to give us a report on the July 4th? I know that is something that our residents are interested in. And let me just say that because I've been getting a lot of complaints about lack of response from our sheriff department. And let me assure you, it's not lack of response. We did a lot of work on, especially on the evening of the 4th of July. And actually, I kind of rode along with one of the units, and we were there from 8:30 until 11. So, Mr. Hockman, if you can just give us a report for the benefit of our residents.
Sure, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Let me start by saying when I was young, I used to enjoy the 4th of July. Working in public safety for 20-some years, not so much anymore. It turns
Let me
out,
guess, you enjoy now the 5th of July, right?
yeah, 5th of August is even better, but we won't get into that. And the reason I say that is because I do feel sorry for our residents dealing with pets, elderly folks, people that have disabilities, people that don't sleep well at night because of all the noise. Really feel sorry for that. I can only help or encourage in a couple, 3 ways here very briefly. One, to tell our residents is certainly our city council, as you gentlemen know, voted to increase the penalty to $2,000 from $1,000. That's more money than is charged by most cities in the area. I did contact numerous of our neighboring cities, and I can report also by way of encouragement that your public safety sheriff's team was working hard on that night in an undercover program. And the reason I know that is because I know how many cars we deployed and I know how many citations were written. So without tattling on our neighbors, I will run down a list here and use no names. Bellflower had 4 cars out that night, and they were able to write 48 citations for people that were caught lighting or possessing fireworks. Another city in the area had 6 cars out. They wrote 24 cites. Another city, 15 cars out dedicated to fireworks enforcement, and they wrote 42. Recall, we were 48. Another city, 11 cars, and they wrote 50 cites. Another city had 24 officers dedicated and wrote 54 cites. So the point of it is they're difficult to write. Our numbers are very competitive with our neighboring cities in terms of how we all try to respond. And our efficiency was the highest in the region as far as what our deputies were able to observe and deal with. So I would offer that too. But the main thing is we all try to get through this thing, do our best to be responsive, do our best to educate, do our best to warn, and then do our best to enforce, and then welcome mid to late July.
And if I can add to that, because I was out there that evening, I think our team was the most efficient, I think, because the deputies I was with, they wrote 15 out of the 48. So
Yeah, they're trying to impress you.
I guess so. But let me just add, though, that our team also caught the guy who was firing a gun. So we lost significant amount of time writing tickets during the prime time of the fireworks. Because prime time for fireworks, but around between 8:30 to 10, that's where you see a lot of fireworks display in Bellflower. So we lost about at least half an hour. But it has to be dealt with. Let me assure you that it was dealt with right away.
Right.
So, and then thanks again to the sheriff who put in the hours. That Lieutenant Milliman, if you can relay the message to our deputies, I thank them on behalf of the city council and residents for putting on the work that evening. And again, let me just assure our residents that your concerns are being heard. So we're addressing that, and we're trying to find other solutions going forward. So that's something that we will be talking with public safety, with our sheriff's department, and our city attorney to make sure that we can implement other tools to make sure that some of our residents are discouraged to do fireworks during the 4th of July holiday. So again, thank you for your report. All right, moving along. Under 11A, Mr. Stewart.
This is a consideration of possible action to conduct a public hearing to consider delinquent refuse service charges and adopt resolution number 19-57, a resolution ordering delinquent refuse service charges to be assessed against the property owners and properties, and such charges be transferred to the county tax rolls. And I believe Mr. Enigmas is here to make the presentation, and Natalie as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Stewart. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight I bring before you the public hearing to consider delinquent refuse service charges. I'll begin with some background. CR&R provides solid waste and recycling services to the city and its residents. CR&R bills customers directly for these services. Refuse service charges become delinquent if not paid within 30 days. Bellflower Municipal Code 13.24.240 defines the procedure for collection of delinquent refuse service charges and the city retains 10% of delinquent amounts. The timeline is as follows. On May 31st, a list of delinquencies was generated by CR&R. On June 5th and July 3rd, CR&R sent a notice to customers. On June 17th, the city sent a notice to property owners that were still delinquent. On July 8th, tonight, we present the public hearing for this item. On July 18th will be the last day for payment, and on August 10th, the final list will be sent to the county. Here we have a comparison of delinquent refuse service charges from last year compared to this year. Last year, as of May 31st, there were 532 delinquent accounts amounting to $92,329. On July 2nd of last year, there were 325 delinquent accounts amounting to $67,162. As of August 10th last year, 263 accounts were delinquent, resulting in $56,685. This year, as of May 31st, the delinquent accounts were at 542, and that amounted to $91,862. As of July 1st of this year, that number was reduced to 345 delinquent accounts, amounting to $66,038, and the amounts for August 10th haven't been determined yet. At this time, the recommendation is to open the public hearing, take testimonial and documentary evidence. After considering this evidence, adopt Resolution 19-57, or alternatively discuss and take other action related to this item. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have. This concludes the presentation. We have Josh Caro from CR&R here if you guys need
I just have a question. Can you go back to the first chart? I'm just kind of curious about this. So, we have Exhibit A as part of the staff report here, which lists all the delinquent amounts.
Yes.
So, the people listed on this on Exhibit A, relating to these dates here, if they pay on July 18th, so they just pay this amount and they're good,
Yes,
correct?
that is correct.
If they don't pay on July 18th, so the final list will be sent to the county on August 10th,
It will
right?
be-
Based on the
yes,
schedule here.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they pay after August 10th, is there any amount penalty on top of what's the delinquent amount on this list?
Yes,
I'm
Mayor.
just kind of curious. So
After August 10th, that's the cutoff. So at that point, it will be between the property owner and the county at that point, because the list would already be submitted and it'll be already enrolled. So at that point, typically when folks call us and say, "Hey, can I still make my payment?" we tell them at that point it's going to be on your tax roll. So you're just going to pay it off when you pay your property taxes.
okay, all right, very good. Thank you. Any question?
Do they pay an inflated amount on August 10th? I mean, when it goes in your tax bill, is that amount different than what it would have been on July 18th?
That's correct, because we would add the 10% city fee to that amount.
All right, so it'd be 10%.
10%
Any other
more.
fees that would be?
I know the county should be charging something.
The county does charge 25 cents per parcel, so that would be another pass-through.
Yeah.
So it would be 10% plus 25 cents.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
no
the
such
only
thing as a
difference.
free lunch. I know the county will take their cut on it.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garza, seconded by Councilmember Hamada to open the public hearing, and without objection, that will be the order. So anyone who would like to speak on this item? Come on up. Please sign in and state your name for the record.
Hello, gentlemen. Good evening. My name is Anthony Russell. I've come in here many times, watch and see R&R and the way that they do business and everything. My first question is, about 10 years ago, Well, the last time the gas went through the roof, when it was over $5 a gallon, this committee gave them a stipend, okay, a very large stipend, okay, and I'm kind of curious what happened to that. You know, CR&R doesn't made any attempt to pay that back in any way, shape, or form. They've been, you know, we've been their customer now for, how many years has it been now since you took over from the last refuge place?
CR&R has been the franchise holder since 2007.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's almost 12 years.
What is your question again? I'm not
My
sure.
question is that what happened to the stipend that this council gave them 12 years ago when the gas went through the roof and they said that they couldn't survive unless they got more money from this city?
Okay. I'm not.
I don't know. It's not that we're not. I don't know the answer to that offhand. We'll have to respond back. We'll get back to you tomorrow on that. This is not the forum to discuss that. This has to do with delinquent trash bills and delinquent trash bills only. I think it's a valid question. I'm happy to respond to it. We just don't have it tonight.
I'd appreciate that.
They're
Okay,
not
we-
asking for a
We
rate.
can go back to the actual bill first.
Sir,
Okay.
let me just explain. They're not asking for a rate increase tonight. All they're trying to do is for those people, customers who haven't paid their bill, their accounts will be sent to LA County. That's all they're asking tonight.
Right.
Okay?
And I
So,
understand how the process works, okay? I don't know if there's anybody else here that gets a bill, okay? My main problem with the bill that I get from them is that they don't mail it. I just got it today on the 8th, okay?
Okay.
They don't mail it till the 5th, 7th, something like that. Sometimes I don't get it till the 12th.
so we have someone from CRNR who can address that issue, sir.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, address what? By that time, they've
Your
already
concern.
made it delinquent.
No,
okay,
no,
and they're
no,
already
no.
doing a
You
charge.
have till the 18th of July to settle up your.
It's not
your
that,
payment.
it's every month.
Okay.
The way that they run their business is that they've already got a pop charge on you, but by the time that you get your first bill
I
in the
see.
mail.
I understand. So why don't we get CNR to address that now? But as far as your delinquency, that won't be an issue as long as you're resolved by the 18th. But as far as the charges, yeah, I wish you'd work that out with him. Yeah. And if it is true, waive the fees.
All right, thank you.
All right. Can you see him after the meeting? All right. All right. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, seeing nobody,
Yes.
I'd like to move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garza, seconded by Councilmember Coops to close the public hearing. And without objection, that will be the order. Okay, gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, if there's no questions or comments from my colleagues, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 19-57.
Second. Oh.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garza, seconded by Councilmember Hamada, to adopt resolution 19-57. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Denton.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada.
Aye.
Councilmember Coops.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza.
Aye.
Mayor Santinez.
Aye. Item 11B, Mr. Stewart.
This is consideration of possible action to conduct a public hearing to consider adopting resolution 19-55, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute agreement file number 619.1 in a form approved by the city attorney with Gus Versakis for downtown alcohol licensing assistance for alcohol service at 16916 Bellflower Boulevard in accordance with the Economic Development Business Assistance Plan.
Mr. De La Longa, is it yours? Or Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight's public hearing is to consider a grant application from Mr. Gus Frusakis for downtown alcohol licensing assistance under the Business Assistance Program. The program provides loans and grants to businesses or property owners to attract and retain business, thereby promoting the city's economic development. As background, the Frusakis Family Trust owns 16916 Bellflower Boulevard, which is best known as the former Cafe Camellia site. On June 25th, Mr. Frusakis leased the property to Antonio Appling, owner of The Nest, a local breakfast eatery on Alondra Boulevard with a very popular following. Mr. Appling plans to open a second location on the property with alcohol service. Mr. Frusakis' property has an existing CUP for alcohol service indoors. However, it does not extend to the outdoor patio that was constructed in 2013 after the CUP was issued in 1987. The patio in question is highlighted in yellow, as you can see in this slide. And recently, Mr. Frusakis applied for a modified CUP to extend the alcohol service to the patio. This is to help the Nest compete with nearby restaurants that offer outdoor dining and alcohol service. The Planning Commission will consider the modified CUP application on July 15th. But before us tonight is a separate application by Mr. Frusakis for downtown business alcohol licensing assistance under the Business Assistance Program. If it's approved, the program will absorb Mr. Frusakis' modified CUP application fee, staff time, and legal fees that are estimated between $3,500 to $5,000. Economic Development staff has reviewed his application for assistance and determined that he qualifies. This assistance will support his efforts to reactivate a prominent downtown property, bring in a successful business to the growing downtown, and promote local economic development. So tonight, staff recommends the City Council open the public hearing, take documentary and testimonial evidence, and after considering the evidence, adopt Resolution 1955, authorizing the city manager to execute Agreement File Number 619.1 with Mr. Frusakis for downtown business licensing assistance, or alternatively discuss and take other action related to this item. And that concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer questions. And unfortunately, Mr. Frusakis is out of town tonight, but his representative, Georgia Alavisos, is available to answer any questions, as well as Antonio Appling of the Nest and Liz O'Neill, our city's restaurant consultant. Thank you.
And when you say Mr. Frusakis, that's Gus, right?
Yes, Gus.
Okay, all right. Just a couple of questions, just for the benefit of our audience here. How many other recipients of this assistance plan took advantage of this benefit, so to speak, from assistance from the city? That's for alcohol.
Specifically for
Yeah,
alcohol,
yeah.
just one other,
Just one?
and that would be Bo Cigars.
Okay, all right. And then any amount in excess of 5,000, the applicant will pay, or it will not exceed 5,000.
It should not exceed
It should not.
5,000. Yes.
Okay, and it's fully loaded cost in terms of staff time.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned about the application for CUP will be heard before the Planning Commission
On
So
July
a-
15th?
So any question about hours of operation, things like that, will be before the Planning Commission?
Absolutely. That would
Okay.
be the best time to vet any questions about the CUP application.
I'm just kind of curious in terms of the plan. Is it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
It's primarily a breakfast restaurant, and they're hoping to develop a dinner menu. But for the time being, in its initial year, it should be primarily
So
breakfast.
they'll be serving alcohol right away at breakfast time?
That's the hope.
Okay. Like-
But if there are any specific questions about the menu, you can also
okay.
direct them to Mr. Appling right there.
Okay, all right. And I'm just kind of curious about it. Yeah. Okay, very good. Any question?
Hope you asked my questions.
Move we
Thank
open
you.
the public hearing.
All right. Motion by Councilmember Dante, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garza to open the public hearing. I'd like to hear from the applicant.
And that would be Georgia Alavisos.
Okay, Georgia.
Who's the property owner?
Property owner, yes, she's the applicant.
Hello, everyone. I'm Georgia Alavisos.
Did I
Good
surprise
evening.
you? I know you've been waiting there anxiously
I've been
for.
waiting. It's been exciting.
Yeah, for 2.5 hours
Yeah.
now, so
Yeah.
it's your chance now to shine.
Yes. Well, we would like to get the CPU for the property. We have a great new tenant there, and we want to revitalize, as you said, the city, and we want to help to do that. So we'd like to get this going.
Okay, so, and you signed your agreement already
Yes.
with the tenant?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so how did you get connected with the tenant?
Through Liz O'Neill, and everything came together. It's wonderful. The Cafe Camellia was great for a long time, and now it's not the standard that we want it to be for the city, and now we have something really great in the works.
And by the way, Liz is just for the benefit of our audience also. Liz is our restaurant consultant for the
Yes.
city, so.
Yes, she's a rock star.
Okay.
That's right.
Any question? Okay, so you're good.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, anyone else who would like to speak on this item?
Mayor, not seeing anybody, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Danton, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garza to close the public hearing. Without objection, that will be the order. All right, gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 19-55. It's a resolution to authorize the city manager to execute agreement file number 619.1 in the form approved by the city attorney.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Danton, seconded by Councilmember Hamada, for the City Council of Bellflower to adopt Resolution 19-55. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dutton,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada,
Aye.
Councilmember Coops,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza,
Aye.
Mayor Santinez.
Aye. Item 11C, Mr. Stewart.
This is consideration possible action to conduct a public hearing to consider issuing one medical cannabis business permit for distribution use. Recommended action is to adopt Resolution 19-68, a resolution approving a medical cannabis business permit to operate a medical cannabis distribution facility at 9032-903 at Artesia Boulevard. The applicant is Elliot Lewis from EL Holdings.
Mr. Mayor, before we continue, if you don't mind, I'd like to recuse myself from item 11C due to the fact that I have a conflict due to an employer-client relationship on this item.
So let the record reflect that Mayor Pro Tem Garza is recusing himself on item 11C. Ms. Stover.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. This evening, I'm bringing forward Agenda Item 11C, a public hearing to consider issuing a medical cannabis business permit, also known as the MCBP, for a distribution use. The applicant, Elliot Lewis, representing EEL Holdings LLC, located at 9032 through 903 Artesia Boulevard, currently holds 2 valid MCBPs. One of those MCBPs is for dispensary use, which is currently active, and one is for a manufacturing use, which is in the works. On May 28th of this year, the applicant submitted an additional MCBP application for distribution at this same location. At this time, staff recommends opening the public hearing, receive testimonial and documentary evidence from the applicant, close the public hearing, and determine whether to issue the MCBP or alternatively discuss and take other action. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions, and the applicant is also here to answer any council questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Just want to confirm that staff have checked all the requirements and they've met all the requirements set by the resolutions passed by the City Council.
This is correct. We've
Okay.
reviewed the full application along with our consultants.
Okay, all right. Any question of Ms. Stover?
I would just like to make a comment on the color that picked for the accent of the report. First time I've seen that. A little flair.
Cannabis green.
You said it.
All right. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I thought you were going to, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Dandan, seconded by Councilmember Hamada to open the public hearing. We'd like to hear from the applicant.
Mr. Elliot Lewis
Mr.
is
Lewis?
here. He's coming forward.
Oh, this is public hearing? So, okay.
Comes
So-
every Monday night.
Yeah, he's the regular here.
Yeah, I know. Before we do that, Mr. Lewis, I'd like to ask anyone who would like to testify for this public hearing. If there's anyone who may testify, please stand so they can be sworn in. Okay? Even if there's a slightest chance that you may testify, there's no cause, doesn't harm you, so. All right. We have 3 or 4. Okay. City Clerk, please.
Do you solemnly state under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter pending before this City Council shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Lewis. Thank you again for coming to this meeting, and I know your business has been operational for how many months now?
I think about approximately 2 months at the retail dispensary.
Okay, how is it so far?
We're hanging in there. We're doing our best under the circumstances. Sales are picking up a little bit.
Okay, good. And I like your signage on the front of the
Yeah,
property. So
well, we gotta let them know
it's
we're
very
there.
attractive. So
Right.
that's good.
Thank you.
I only have one question here on your application, on the staff report here. It says here that the applicant expects to open the distribution use in June of 2020. So that's about a year from now.
I think it's realistic. You know, I think there's been a lot of tossing around of timeframes. I'd rather give timeframes that are realistic. Best case scenario, probably 9 months. A distribution build out is a little bit easier. Assuming, you know, we could get approved tonight, we would start a plan. You submit that, you know, you figure 45 days, 60 days to get it together, 60, 90 days to get through the city, another 4 or 5 months to build out, and then whatever unforeseen issues that inevitably pop up. The good thing is we've done a lot of the, we call it campus improvements, the driveways and the handicap parking and all that, so probably won't be as involved. But also keep in mind, we got a pretty heavy lift with the manufacturing that we're building out, so you know, I think that's just a realistic time frame. Best case, maybe 9 months, but I'd rather not, you know, sit here and overpromise.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking the question is I look back at your application for dispensary, the last go-around,
Yes, sir.
and you mentioned that you'll be open in 9 months. So I'm just wondering, if you can open dispensary in 9 months, why will it take you 1 year for distribution? So educate me here.
I mean, I think
what's the
that-
difference between, in terms of opening your facility, between distribution and dispensary? Because I thought, from my perspective, that dispensary will be more involved in terms of construction, because you have your lobby, you have your reception area, and things like that. So educate me here.
Yeah, it's fairly similar. You know, I think the range is 9 months to a year. You know, we didn't submit a new presentation. I think you guys are probably pretty sick of hearing from me. You know who I am. So we weren't sure necessarily when we would get approved. So I think the range is 9 months, 9 to 12 months. There is some really complex state requirements with the distribution. They aren't that easy to do either. You know, the major difference is you have a little bit more design elements in the retail, but you know, I think they're similar in time frame.
And you know, the ultimate reason why I'm asking the question is because I want to see some money this year.
No,
you know that, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah,
I'm being very honest with you.
No, I know, and I'm
so
trying.
when I look at your last application, it's 9 months, and now it's 1 year. So there's some disconnect here, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think it will be right within that range. I understand Ms. Stover told me that you guys are going to get 10,000 up front, which was news to me today. So you'll get
There's your money. Sam.
so you will get some money regardless of what we do. You know, our goal has always been to develop the whole campus. It's a major undertaking. You know, just to put it out there, we're going a little slower on the manufacturer than I like, but we're getting there. And then you know the kind of the weird dynamic is if we don't have the distribution, we couldn't even take our manufactured
Right.
products and sell them in our retail facility. We'd have to go touch down in Long Beach. We're working on a facility that would probably we would utilize to do it. So it seems a little bit silly. Plus, like I said, since we bought the property, our goal was always to develop the whole thing. So kind of the last units that aren't spoken for are that distribution.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because in your first go around here, I was kind of shocked when you said that you don't need a distribution permit back then.
Well, I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but I think the order of kind of how it went made sense for us. But fair enough.
And I'm glad that you turned around and then applying for a distribution license this time.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Any question of Mr. Lewis?
I just make a comment. We'd rather have Mr. Lewis get his permit tonight than 6 months from now and still open up at 2020, June of 2020. So I don't think that's, he's being proactive to hurry up and get it as he builds his business. He's got to build his distribution customers. It's just a process. It's something he can just cross off the list. So I don't think we need to hold his feet to the fire why he's going to open June of 2020.
Well, I'm just caught my attention about the timing. Okay, any question of Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, Mr. Lewis, again, thank you for coming and working hard on this. And so you think the benefit of getting a permit now will get you kind of a sort of a few steps ahead with the state? That's the way I kind of took.
Right. So that's the other issue. As soon as we get that, we'll apply for the local authorization, and then
Paperwork's in the pile, and then
I'll send this off to the architect to start making something up. They've done a substantial amount already because the application process here in Bellflower is pretty robust. So they're part of the way along, but he has to do the MEPs and all that stuff. So, hopefully we could get it submitted, 30, 45, 60 days at the most, depending on what his workload is, and, start the process. We're pretty familiar with the Bellflower Building Department and how it works. So I think we'll be able to, hopefully get it through and approved, maybe 4 or 5 months and start working on it. So, best case scenario, I think 9 months, but my experience is nothing ever happens on the timelines that we hope. That's if everything goes perfect. And I don't know what's going to happen to get in the way of 9 months, but typically there's always, some little snag somewhere. So we'll do our best to do 9 months. I think somewhere 9 months to a year is realistic. It isn't nearly as involved as the manufacturing, probably on par with the retail, maybe a little bit less, but, we'll get over there and move on it.
Did you get all the auto tenants out? Have you? Has
Well,
that been clear? There's still one left? or-
There's one guy left.
Oh, it is. That's what it is.
I'm gonna have him go.
Maybe.
He's on month to month. He's paying $1,200. He
All
wasn't
right,
getting
well,
in my way, so I
if
figured
you-
I might as
all
well
right.
just take the money. But once we get awarded this,
right.
I'll give him the 30 days notice. I think he just uses it for storage. He's kind of the last man standing, but he pays
All
his
right.
rent on
Okay,
time, so I was taking it.
So
yeah.
no conflicts in
No, I don't.
operation.
I mean, you never know. He might refuse to move out or something, but
Oh,
he's been
well,
really
leave all the
easygoing,
job,
cool
whatever
guy.
it is,
Right,
yeah.
right. But there is the middle unit there. I think it's the middle one on the A is occupied by a tenant, and everybody else is out.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Coops?
Yes, I want to remind the council that Mr. Lewis was the last one to start his construction, and he's the first guy that was actually selling product. So I have total confidence in his ability to put this thing together, probably quicker than the 9 months, but I understand why it is that you're giving yourself some leeway.
Right.
Because you're just so many unknown factors. But I've always been a proponent of what you do, because I know that you have a workable plan that can be executed in a dramatic way. And I have no qualms about allowing you to go forward in a timely manner that you're being just cautious on.
Yeah, I'm confident we'll get it done. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words.
Okay. And again, I just want to kind of thank you for applying for the distribution permit, because I don't want any other city to get that benefit.
Right. Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it would be almost an absurdity the way that
Right, exactly.
is set up. And I actually didn't think of it at the time because the rules were changing pretty quickly, but it seems to make sense.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
All right,
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Anyone who would like to speak on this agenda? Very good.
Not seeing any,
Okay.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Danton, seconded by Councilmember Coops to close the public hearing. And without objection, that will be the order.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 1958, resolution approving the medical cannabis business permit operated a medical cannabis distribution facility at 9032 through 9038 Artesia Boulevard.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Danton, seconded by Councilmember Coops, for the City Council of Bellflower to adopt Resolution 19-58. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dutton,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada,
Aye.
Councilmember Coops,
Aye.
Mayor Santenaz.
Aye. Can someone get Mayor Pro Tem Garza? Oh,
There
he's
it
there.
is.
Let the record reflect that Mayor Pro Tem Garza is rejoining the council meeting. There are no ordinances or resolutions for consideration tonight, and we'll be moving on to item 13A, Mr. Stewart.
This is a consideration of possible action to approve the notice of public hearing for proposed adjustments to the maximum rates on the solid waste collection services.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council.
Good evening, Mr. Inyegas.
For background, in 2011, the city entered into a revised and restated solid waste franchise agreement with CR&R that established the initial maximum rates for solid waste services. The agreement allows CR&R to submit annual rate adjustment requests based on an approved methodology that includes indices such as fuel, labor, equipment, disposal, and transformation. On April 16, 2018, the City Council adopted Resolution Number 18-18, establishing the Prop 218 procedures for increases to solid waste rates. These procedures require the City Council to approve the Proposition 218 notice, which contains the proposed monthly rates for residential and commercial services in the date in which the rates will become effective if approved. On May 31st, 2019, CNR submitted an annual rate adjustment request for the 2019 rate year, which runs from September 1, 2019 through August 31, 2020. In order to consider the proposed adjustment to the rates, a new Proposition 218 proceeding must be conducted. Public Works has prepared the Prop 218 notice, which provides the notice date of August 26, 2019 for the public hearing, contains the proposed rates for rate year 2019 and estimated rates for year 2020, discloses that if the proposed rates are approved, they would then take effect on September 1, 2019, and contains the official ballot for property owners or authorized representatives wishing to protest the rates. If the Prop 218 notice is approved, it will then be mailed to property owners and CRNR customers. Public Works reviewed CRNR's 2019 annual rate adjustment request. The rate adjustment methodology resulted in the following percentage changes to the service categories. For the card category, which is the residential rates, that was an increase of 4.1%. For the commercial and multifamily bins, that was an increase of 3.7%. For the roll-off box service, it was an increase of 2.3%. And for the roll-off box processing, 1.9%. Based on the percentage changes above, the impact on the typical monthly bill will be as follows. For the standard card residential service, the current rate of $18.87 would increase to $19.64. And for the 3-yard bin picked up once a week, the current rate of $130.49 would increase to $135.32. To estimate the rates for 2020, Public Works calculated the average service category percentage changes from 2007, which is the start of the CNR franchise agreement, to 2019. This rate adjustment projection methodology resulted in the following percentage changes to the service categories. For the residential card service, that would be an increase of 3.7%. For the bin, commercial and multifamily, that would be an increase of 3.7%. For the roll-off box service, an increase of 2.7%. And for the roll-off box processing, an increase of 2.8%. Based on the percentage changes above, the impact on the typical monthly bill will be as follows. The rate of $19.64 for residential service would increase to $20.37. The rate for the commercial or multifamily 3-yard bin collected once a week would then increase from $135.32 to $140.32. Now, keep in mind, these are estimated rates. Should the actual rates exceed it, then another 218 process would have to take place. The staff recommendation is to approve the notice of public hearing or alternatively discuss and take other action related to this item. This concludes my staff report. Now we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, Mr. Iniguez, just one question. So when the city will mail the notice to the residents, right?
Correct. CRNR will mail it on the city's behalf.
On behalf, okay. So what will the residents get? Is it all these pages here, all the rates? Will they get the whole package?
That is correct. That
Okay.
would be formulating the entire package, including the ballot.
Okay. So, and just for the benefit of our audience here and also the those on TV land, what's before us tonight is basically the approval of the notice of public hearing. That's all we're approving tonight, is to the public hearing. The public hearing will be, based on the notice here, will be held on August 26th in conjunction with the City Council meeting. So that's the second meeting of August. So that's where any issue about the rates will be heard. But tonight, the only purpose of this item is to approve the notice of public hearing.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, all right. Any question of Mr. Iniguez?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, go ahead. Councilmember Dunn.
The Proposition 218, is that just a a proceeding, or is it guidelines of how the trash rates and scope of work are dictated?
Those are guidelines for a protest hearing, since it does impact
Just a protest
solid
hearing part
waste.
of it. Okay, got it. Okay.
Correct.
That's all I need to know.
Okay, very good. Because I think the rates are governed by the franchise agreement.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. All right, anyone who'd like to speak, anyone from the public would like to speak on this item? Okay. All right. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, if there's
Yes.
no comments or questions from my colleagues, I'd like to recommend that we approve the notice of public hearing as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garza, seconded by Councilmember Hamada to approve the notice of public hearing. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dutton?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada?
Aye.
Councilmember Coops?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza?
Aye.
Mayor Santinez?
Aye. All right, next item, consent calendar. Anyone who'd like to pull any item?
One correction, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor. Item 14B, there has been one correction made on the public comments section, page 414 under those minutes, and I just would request that the council approve those as amended.
As
But,
amended,
yeah.
okay? Duly noted.
Mayor,
Councilmember Dunn?
I'd like to recuse myself from 14C due to a real property interest conflict.
Anyone else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garza, seconded by Councilmember Hamada to approve the consent calendar. Noted that Councilmember Danto is recusing himself on item 14C, and item 14B has been corrected. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Dutton?
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada?
Aye.
Councilmember Coops?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza?
Aye.
Mayor Santinez?
Aye. All right,
Forgot I was first.
council reports. Councilmember Dunn.
No comments tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Hamada.
Oh. Well, we've been busy since the last meeting. I was pleased to attend the two Boca Business Improvement District subcommittee meetings during the end of last month here for both the north and the south areas. I believe those went really well, and we got some great input from the community property owners, and we'll be hopefully taking the next steps here in the next few months. Had the again opportunity to attend the opening of I'm sorry, there's something else. Well, yes, it was the first Street Fest. So again, great time, and again, thank you to PJ and his staff for putting together another great show and getting the community out there. It was really well attended. On the 28th, the mayor and I were able to attend the Kaiser Cancer Survivors event. It was another nice event for the community, and to see cancer survivors again put on a nice fashion show, and they were able to really have a good time, and they're blessed to be still again present with us, and to just know that again a lot of families get together, and there's a lot of support, not only families but also the from Kaiser, and Kaiser did hint of another future facility on their premises, and that's we'll bring that up later down the road. Did have a chance on the 29th to attend the Margaret's House panel. Again, it was a great opportunity to hear those who actually live in the Margaret House and who have lived there and who have been able to move on, some quicker than others, but people have been, again, blessed to just get the opportunity to, again, live in the house with the hospitality of the not only the site owner, prior owner, and the couple up that lives in front. Again, there's just some great stories to hear of how people have been able to overcome their challenges and move on. Also on the 29th, that same day, the mayor and I were able to attend the Young Legislators event through Assemblyperson Garcia, and again had a great time with. We had a number of Bellflower residents who had participated in the program, and I had the pleasure to sit next to a Bellflower resident who's going to Harvard next year. So that's an awesome what I heard. So and on the 4th, the mayor and council and Coops and I were able to attend the flag raising at the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And again, want to thank the mayor for really putting together some great words and comments about patriotism, history, and just living in the land of the free. So again, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamada. Councilmember Coops.
I have no comments.
Mayor Pro Tem Garza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 26th of June, I attended a gateway. It's called the Gateway Cities Transit Summit. So it was essentially a meeting of gateway cities that were meeting with Robert Garcia, who is our representative on the Metro Board. The meeting was in Southgate, and the big reason for the meeting was Metro and Long Beach Transit and Norwalk Transit were trying to show to us as gateway cities that that bus ridership is declining. And I think after we got this report, the next day was when the story hit the LA Times. So bus ridership, not surprisingly, is declining. And so they were coming to us to present to us their efforts to optimize the bus system and the elimination of some routes and the addition of some other routes and create synergies with different rail lines. In our case, the West Santa Ana branch line that's coming in. It's been 25 years since Metro and these agencies have undertaken an effort like this, so it's been a while. And again, it was a really eye-opening experience. And so I made sure that one of the proposals that they had is to create the first optimization of routes occur within a year. Actually, would be less than a year from now, which is really fast. And we obviously haven't told our residents about this. We weren't aware. And so I think they're going to push some of these deadlines back so that our residents don't, when these things happen, that our residents aren't surprised by these changes. And that's really it in terms of what happened, because I know it's going to be a while before we have our next council meeting. I did want to share that this coming Friday, State Senator Wiener, who is the author of that legislation that we were able to successfully convert to a 2-year bill, is going to be touring the gateway cities on a fact-finding mission to figure out what it is that we have in terms of housing here in our gateway cities, and to find a solution with us to figure out what would work in terms of housing solutions going forward. So I do commend him for that. I'll be participating in that as the president of the LA County Divisional League. And we're also going to have Diane Du Bois from Lakewood, who's going to be participating as the chair of the COG in our region. So that should be interesting this coming Friday. On the 15th, a week from today, the charter subcommittee of this city council is going to be meeting for the first time. So if you have an interest in that, come. I think the meeting is going to be in the green room, Mr. City Manager. So look out for that. That should be a good conversation, considering some of the items that we're getting from Sacramento. And then lastly, on the 6th of August, National Night Out, which is an effort to promote the working relationship between community and our public safety agencies, is coming up. It's always a nice event, and I know that Joel and the team put a really good effort with that and a good event. So I absolutely invite the community to come out and participate in that. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Garza. It's been a kind of a pleasure to be with Councilmember Hamada in a lot of the events around the city. Seems like we're kind of tied together in so many events. So it's a pleasure. So I just want to kind of add that this Thursday will be our Street Fest. Again, thanks to our Parks and Recreation staff, led by Director PJ Milena. And I'd like to invite everyone. It's going to be the Smith Band playing country music. So if you like country music, please come over, wear your boots and hats, and do some dancing. And also on July 31st will be the first meeting of the Revenue Committee, and we look forward to a lot of ideas especially from the members of the committee. And I've been getting a few inquiries about the aquatic center, so I'm going to ask Director of Public Works, Len Gorecki, to give us a kind of a brief update in terms of where we were, how it got started, and estimated date of completion. So, Mr. Gorecki.
So we have an hour?
No.
No.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, this has been a.
We just want a synopsis.
Yeah. Well, just to, briefly kind of summarize it. We started we in 2015 we started a citywide energy efficiency project that had a lot of components to it. One of those components was developing and building a solar thermal unit on the roof of Thompson Park, the aquatic center, to heat the indoor swimming pool, get off of the natural gas and utilize the solar energy, and to be more conscientious of the environment. So that project started in 2015, the citywide project. The following year, 2016, we started the design for the aquatic center, office, locker room, ADA improvements. So we completed that design in the back half of 2016. Around the beginning of 2017, when the Climate Tech group was getting ready to do the roofing system, what they discovered in their initial process was there was a lot of portions of that roof that were disintegrated. They would not support the thermal system that was going to be on top. So what we did at that moment is we told that contractor to hold off on doing that portion of the work. We went ahead and awarded the project for the ADA work for the locker rooms and the offices. We awarded that in 2018. That was done and awarded at the original cost of just a little under $700,000 to do that work. The thought at that time was we would utilize that contractor while he was there on site to go ahead and start peeling off the roof and see where we're at. So we have two separate projects that were paralleling each other that we simply tried to combine into one. What we found out when he started digging in was the whole roof from side to side, north to south, east to west was an absolute shambles. At that point, that required the roof for the building, the facility, to be completely redesigned. Not only redesigned for the structure to support what we were planning on doing there, and also to bring the building up to compliance with current earthquake retrofit codes that we need, that it wasn't at that time compliant with. So in order to do that work, we did an additional change order on top of the $700,000 for the tune of about $415,000. That got the roof taken care of for us. That also handled a lot of other things that were not discovered until they started getting into the work inside the locker rooms and the office space. So what we started finding is we had corroded underground electrical conduits. Now, mind you, that facility is nearly 60 years old. So there was a lot of stuff that we just didn't know what was going on until we started digging into it. We had to end up replacing the boiler, and then we did some modifications to the ADA improvements that we were going to do inside there. So that was the first change order for the project. Then what happened was, once we completed the roof work and the contractor finished that work and he started working on the inside, because the roof was a complete tear-off, we now had all this work on the interior side of the ceiling and the roofing. New lighting, new mechanical equipment, new electrical, the new paint. We had to replaster the pool. So we brought another change order to the city council, and that one was to the tune of a little under $700,000 as well. We're all done with change orders. We're near the end of the project. with the second change order, not only were we doing the improvements on the underside of the roof, we also had discovered at that point in the construction, we had a leaky water supply line. The actual supply from the filters to the pool run itself was about a 50-foot run. It was all under the deck concrete. We had no idea where the break was. We were cameraing it. We were doing everything we could to try to find out where this was, because what we did not want to do is rip up the entire south deck and add another $200,000-300,000 onto the change order. It was just getting too long. We were trying to get the project just wrapped up and get the pool back open. So we had leaky water supply lines. We replastered the pool. We found a corroded sewer line inside there that we had to replace. So it was just kind of growing, and that was the second and final change order. So the total cost to the project to date is a little over $1.8 million. But the good news is the construction part of the project is supposed to be completed by the end of this month in July. And then we'll be doing a opening of the new facility, a grand opening, probably sometime in August, once we get it back open to the public. So it's been a long 4 years that this has been going on. What started off as two separate projects molded into one project. There was a lot of unforeseen stuff that was going on inside a building of that age. And we were just trying to address it as much as we could. Hindsight, for another $3-4 million, we could have knocked the building down and built a brand new one. But you're still looking at a $6 to $7 million capital project at that point. So we still thought that this was the best path to go for us. So, in a nutshell, that's it in summary. What's gone on, what we've spent, and when we're looking to open the pool back up.
Okay, well, thanks for the update. And I just want to assure our residents that first and foremost is what we are very concerned about safety. That's why the roof was fixed. And after everything is said and done, we'll have a newer pool, energy efficient, and it's going to be state of the art with new lockers and things like that. So that's something that our residents will enjoy and will be proud of. But in the meantime, the outdoor pool is being used. So it's not a matter of that the swimming pool is out of action. There's some swimming happening right now as we speak. During the day, using the outdoor swimming pool. Okay. So with that, let me just make the announcement that there'll be no second regular meeting for this month per Bellflower Municipal Code. So we'll adjourn this meeting to the regular meeting of the Bellflower City Council at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, August 12th, 2019. So this meeting is adjourned.
Nope. Hey.